Tonight, before your eyes slowly drift closed, and the thoughts of a long day gently settle into stillness, I invite you to travel back tens of thousands of years, to a world without cities, without electricity, without crowded roads, or the sound of an alarm clock greeting the morning. There is only a sky overflowing with stars, vast ancient forests, the whisper of wind weaving through rocky cliffs, and the soft flicker of small campfires glowing in the darkness. This is the world of the first humans, people who lived, struggled, loved, and endured in the heart of the wilderness, sustained by all the resilience that life itself could offer. Perhaps we often imagine prehistoric people as nothing more than primitive humans carrying stone tools, hunting wild animals, and simply trying to survive from one day to the next. But was that truly the whole story? What stirred within their minds as they gazed up at a sky filled with countless stars? Did they experience fear, hope, and love in ways not so different from our own? And if we could sit beside their fire on a quiet night, would we discover that the distance between modern humanity and our ancient ancestors is far smaller than we have always imagined? Carl Gustav Jung believed that beneath every conscious mind lies a collective unconscious, a deep reservoir where memories and archetypal patterns have been carried forward through countless generations. Perhaps that is why, when we listen to stories about our ancestors, we are doing more than learning history. We are also listening to a profoundly ancient part of ourselves, a part that still quietly lives on in our dreams, our intuition, and our enduring longing to reconnect with the natural world. On tonight's journey, we will explore 100 fascinating facts about the lives of prehistoric people, not through the hurried rhythm of a history lecture, but through stories told slowly, gently, and with vivid imagery, allowing each fact to glow like a small fire, warming the mind before you drift into sleep. You will discover how they searched for food, how they protected their families, how they raised their children, how they met the challenges of a harsh and unforgiving world with remarkable intelligence, and how, step by step, they laid the foundations for the world we call home today. If you enjoy stories that explore the depths of human nature, history, psychology, and quiet reflections before bedtime, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the journeys still to come. Each night, we will step together into a new story, a peaceful place where science, history, and deeply human perspectives meet, allowing the mind to slow down and gently guiding you toward a restful, restorative sleep. Now, take a slow, gentle breath. Let your shoulders soften and allow the sounds of today to quietly fade into the distance. The fire crackles softly before you. The night sky stretches endlessly overhead, and our journey back to the dawn of humankind has only just begun. Part 1. The true world of prehistoric people. Night has slowly settled over the land. Perhaps the room around you has grown quieter as well. The sounds of a long day are gradually fading into the distance, making way for the gentle stillness of the night. In this peaceful silence, I would like to invite you on a very special journey, not to an ancient city, nor to a magnificent civilization filled with palaces or pyramids, but much farther back, so far back that almost every trace of that world has been softened by the passage of time. Imagine that. In a single moment, every electric light around you disappears. There are no passing cars, no towering buildings, no clocks, no phones, no calendars waiting to tell you what comes next. Before you stretches only the vast night sky, filled with more stars than most people in the modern world ever have the chance to see. A gentle breeze carries the scent of damp earth, wild grasses, and ancient forests, reaching all the way to the horizon. In the distance, the chorus of insects mingles with the soft rustling of leaves, creating a melody that no human hand has ever composed. This is the world our ancestors once called home. When we think of prehistoric people, many of us immediately picture a familiar image: a man with tangled hair, wrapped in animal skins, holding a heavy stone club, living inside a dark cave and spending every day chasing enormous beasts. That image has appeared in children's books, animated films, and countless works of entertainment for decades. It is simple, memorable, and, in many ways, quite entertaining. But like many images repeated for so long, it has quietly become a stereotype. The truth, as archaeology, anthropology, and modern science have gradually revealed, is far richer than that. Not all prehistoric people lived in caves. In fact, most of the time, they lived beneath the open sky. Caves were simply one of many kinds of shelter they used whenever conditions made them suitable. Across many regions, people built simple dwellings from branches, animal bones, dried grasses, and hides. Some communities moved with the changing seasons, crossing grasslands, forests, and open plains as they followed migrating herds or searched for fresh sources of water. They understood that nature was always changing, and that survival depended upon changing with it. Perhaps the greatest surprise is that they did not live in the chaotic world we often imagine. They had families. They had companions. They divided responsibilities. Knowledge was passed from elders to children. Their communities lived by shared customs and unwritten rules. Each day began with decisions of profound importance. Where should we go today? Is there still enough water? Have the herds already moved on? What is the sky trying to tell us? Will the rain arrive before sunset? These questions may sound unfamiliar to us today. But for prehistoric people, every answer could determine whether their community would continue to survive or face hunger and danger. That does not mean their lives were filled only with fear. Quite the opposite. Because they encountered nature every single day, they learned to observe the world with astonishing sensitivity. They noticed the slightest change in the color of the sky before a storm. They could tell whether a footprint belonged to a deer that had passed only minutes ago or one that had walked there many days before. They recognized hundreds of different plants simply by the shape of a leaf or the faint scent drifting on the wind. They remembered the locations of hidden streams, berry patches, places where fine stone could be shaped into tools, and safe paths winding through the forest. In a world without maps, memory was the map. In a world without guidebooks, experience was the library. And in a world without technology, careful observation was the greatest tool of all. Carl Gustav Jung devoted many years to exploring the deepest layers of the human mind. He believed that beneath our everyday awareness lies something far more ancient, a collective unconscious where shared patterns, instincts, and memories of humanity quietly remain. Even though we now live in modern cities surrounded by technology, perhaps there is still an ancient part within each of us that longs for the natural world. Perhaps that is why so many people feel peaceful when listening to falling rain, walking among forest trees, or quietly watching a fire burn in the darkness. Some feelings seem to have accompanied humanity since the very beginning. No one needed to teach them. No books were required. They are simply part of who we are. Now imagine a prehistoric morning. The sun has not yet risen above the horizon. There is no alarm clock, no crowded schedule waiting to begin. The first person to awaken may be the keeper of the fire. Gently, they place a few dry branches onto the glowing embers, so the flame will not die after the long night. A warm orange light slowly spreads outward, bringing comfort to those still asleep. Far away, birds begin to sing, not as music meant for enjoyment, but as signals. Some birds announce the arrival of dawn, others warn that predators are nearby. Every sound carries meaning. Every scent in the air tells a story. Perhaps the wind has changed direction. Perhaps a herd passed through during the night. Perhaps rain will arrive before afternoon. None of these things are written down. They are remembered through experience, passed from one voice to another, learned through thousands upon thousands of careful observations. If a child were to ask why they should not travel toward the hill today, the elders might not explain it through concepts like atmospheric pressure or wind patterns. Yet they would know that many seasons ago, whenever the sky wore those colors and the wind moved in that particular way, a great storm almost always followed. That is knowledge, a kind of knowledge shaped through generations of patiently observing the natural world. Perhaps that is why we should never judge prehistoric people by what they did not possess. They had no computers, but they possessed extraordinary memories. They had no satellites, yet they knew how to read the sky. They had no navigation apps, yet they knew every river, every narrow trail, and every migration route of the animals. They had no clocks, yet they sensed the passing of time through the position of the sun, the movement of the stars, and the steady rhythms of nature. If modern people depend heavily upon external devices, prehistoric people carried almost all of their technology within their own minds. It was a mind trained every single day to remember, to reason, to observe, and to adapt. Perhaps the most remarkable thing is not that they survived in a world filled with danger. It is that they did so through intelligence, not through physical strength alone, not through blind courage, but through an endless willingness to learn from nature itself. And from those quiet lessons, step by step, humanity began the long journey of evolution that would continue for hundreds of thousands of years, eventually leading to the civilization we know today. But before any of that unfolded, every day in the life of a prehistoric person remained a journey filled with challenges, where even the smallest decision could mean the difference between life and death. And within those seemingly ordinary days, the intelligence of our species was shaped slowly, patiently, and with extraordinary resilience. Seen from the distance of tens of thousands of years, prehistoric life may appear to be nothing more than an endless series of dangers. Indeed, nature was not always gentle. Winters could last longer than expected. Torrential rains could wash away a shelter. A herd changing its migration route without warning might force an entire group to alter its path. Sometimes, even the smallest mistake could bring consequences that are difficult for modern people to imagine. Yet if we focus only on those hardships, we may overlook what matters most. Prehistoric people did not wake each morning believing they were entering a battle. For them, it was simply life. Just as we rise today to go to work, care for our families, or complete familiar responsibilities, our ancestors also began each day with ordinary tasks. Some prepared hunting tools, some gathered dry wood to keep the fire alive, some cared for young children, some checked the water supply, others watched the sky, searching for signs of the coming weather. These tasks were repeated every day. Through repetition came experience, and over time, experience became wisdom. Today, if we want to know whether a plant is safe to eat, we simply reach for a phone and search for the answer in seconds. Prehistoric people had no such luxury. Every piece of knowledge had to be earned through time, careful observation, and sometimes through painful lessons. Because of this, they learned to remember with extraordinary care. One fruit ripened near the end of summer. One root should be dug only after rainfall. A certain stream slowly dried as the dry season approached. Every detail was preserved in the shared memory of the community. Perhaps memory has never carried greater value. Not memory for passing an examination, but memory for continuing to live. Carl Gustav Jung believed that experiences repeated across countless generations leave profound impressions upon the human psyche. Although modern science does not interpret this as inherited memory in a literal biological sense, the idea still offers a beautiful reflection. Perhaps the sense of peace we feel while watching a fire, the comfort of listening to rain, or the quiet joy of walking through a green forest are invisible threads connecting us to the countless generations of ancestors who lived alongside nature for hundreds of thousands of years. There is something else we often forget. Prehistoric people did not live alone. Films often portray a solitary man struggling against the entire world. Yet archaeological evidence suggests their lives were far more deeply rooted in community than we often imagine. They shared food. They cared for one another's children. They supported the elderly and the injured. Archaeologists have even discovered the remains of people who suffered severe disabilities yet lived for many years afterward. This tells us they must have been cared for by those around them over long periods of time. That is not the mark of a savage society. It is the mark of compassion. Perhaps, from the very beginning, humanity understood that its greatest strength did not belong to the strongest individual. It belonged to the ability to survive together. That truth remains just as meaningful today. When we think about modern life, we often measure intelligence by technological inventions, towering buildings, or complex machines. But if we travel back to humanity's earliest days, we discover that intelligence once had a very different shape. It was the ability to listen to the wind, to the flowing water, to the songs of birds, to the unusual silence of the forest. It was also the ability to be patient enough to wait for the herds to appear, patient enough to learn from the elders, patient enough to observe the changing seasons, and above all, it was the ability to adapt. Nature never promises that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. For that reason, people could never survive by clinging to rigid habits. They learned to change. When food became scarce, they moved. When winter approached, they prepared more carefully. When one method no longer worked, they searched for another. Perhaps this was nature's greatest gift to our ancestors. Not safety, but the ability to adapt to whatever circumstances life would bring. If Jung were still alive today, he might remind us that we can never truly understand ourselves if we forget where we came from. For the deeper we explore the story of human evolution, the more we discover that many of the instincts, emotions, and patterns of behavior we carry today were shaped in a past unimaginably distant. When we startle at a sudden, loud sound, when we feel safer in the presence of those we love, when we instinctively seek light in the darkness, when we long for a place to call home, perhaps all of these are echoes carried across the vast history of our species. That does not make us primitive, quite the opposite. It reminds us that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, beneath its modern surface, we remain human beings carrying the legacy of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. There is a fascinating paradox. Prehistoric people knew very little about atoms, bacteria, or distant planets. Yet they understood an extraordinary amount about the world beneath their feet. They knew when the flowers would bloom, when fish would return to the river, when the birds would begin their migration, when a shifting wind announced the arrival of a new season. Perhaps they possessed far less information than we do today, yet they shared a far deeper relationship with the world that surrounded them. In modern life, we sometimes spend hours looking at glowing screens while forgetting to lift our eyes toward the sky. We know the latest news from every corner of the world, yet rarely notice the colors of the sunset unfolding right before us. That does not mean modern life is somehow wrong. It simply reminds us that there is another way of living, one that moves more slowly, observes more carefully, and remains more fully present with the world as it is. Perhaps that is why stories of prehistoric people continue to hold such enduring fascination. They are not simply stories about people who lived long ago. They are stories about ourselves, about the origins of curiosity, the origins of courage, the origins of cooperation, the origins of wisdom, and even the origins of our dreams. When you look up at a sky filled with stars on a night untouched by city lights, there is a good chance you are seeing almost the very same sky our ancestors gazed upon tens of thousands of years ago. Those stars are still there. The moon still follows its familiar cycles. The seasons continue to change. Nature still moves quietly according to its own timeless rhythm. Only humanity has changed so very much. Yet deep within us, perhaps a small part of those prehistoric people still lives on, a part that is moved by the sound of rain, A part that finds peace beside a glowing fire. A part that never loses its desire to explore the world. And a part that continues searching for the meaning of life. Perhaps that is why tonight's journey is more than a voyage into the distant past. It is also a journey back to ourselves, back to the deepest and most ancient layers of the human mind, where people and nature were once inseparable. And as we continue walking this path together, many more discoveries await us. For now that we have begun to understand the true world of prehistoric people, another question naturally arises. What did an ordinary day in their lives truly look like, from the first light of sunrise until the final ember faded into the night? Part 2. The art of survival and reading nature. The night remains wonderfully quiet. The small fire before us continues to burn with a steady glow, casting warm amber light across the ground. Beyond it, darkness gently embraces the ancient forest, wrapping it in a silence that feels both mysterious and deeply peaceful. If you listen carefully enough, you may notice that the forest is never truly silent. The wind continues telling its stories through the leaves overhead. A tiny insect sings its steady evening song. Farther away, water slips softly between scattered stones, and every so often, a bird offers a brief call as it awakens. To us today, these sounds are often little more than part of the natural world. But to prehistoric people, they were a language without written words, without an alphabet, without textbooks, yet one of astonishing precision for those who knew how to listen. If modern life often begins with looking at a phone screen to catch up on the day's news, prehistoric people began their mornings by reading the world around them. They stepped outside their shelter, drew a slow breath, and allowed every one of their senses to awaken. Their eyes studied the ground. Their ears listened to the forest. Their sense of smell searched the wind. Their feet felt the moisture beneath the soil. Even their skin noticed the slightest shift in the air before the weather began to change. Each morning was like opening a brand new book. A book written not with ink, but with grasses, with clouds, with footprints, with scents, and with the subtle transformations of nature itself. Perhaps this was one of the most extraordinary abilities humanity has ever possessed. We often imagine that knowledge belongs inside libraries or classrooms. Yet for most of human evolution, nature itself was our first teacher. Every breeze carried a lesson. Every season taught something about patience, preparation, and adaptation. Imagine yourself walking across soft ground after a gentle rain. Suddenly, you notice a trail of footprints ahead. To many of us, they would appear to be nothing more than shallow impressions left in the earth. But to a prehistoric hunter, an entire story begins to unfold. From the shape of the hoof alone, they could tell whether the tracks belonged to a deer, a wild boar, or an ancient wild ox. The distance between each footprint revealed whether the animal had been calmly feeding or fleeing in alarm. The depth of the prints suggested whether the animal was large or small, healthy or carrying young. If the soil around the tracks remained damp and the edges were still sharp, they knew the animal had passed only a short time before. If the tracks had already been softened by the wind or covered by dry leaves, they understood that the herd had moved on many hours earlier. Every tiny detail mattered, not because they possessed magical abilities, but because they had spent an entire lifetime learning how to observe. Today, science describes this as pattern recognition. The human brain is remarkably skilled at detecting subtle changes hidden within enormous amounts of information. Prehistoric people exercised that ability every single day until it became a natural part of the way they experienced the world. Carl Gustav Jung believed that the human mind naturally seeks symbols and hidden relationships beneath outward appearances. Perhaps our ancestors lived in much the same way. A footprint was never simply a footprint. A cloud was never merely a cloud. Every sign belonged to a much larger picture that they had to learn to read in order to survive. Yet the ground was not the only storyteller. The sky told stories as well. When dawn arrived, wearing unfamiliar colors, when the clouds hung lower than usual, when the wind shifted direction, when the air became heavier with moisture, prehistoric people understood that nature was preparing to change. They had no weather forecasts, no satellites, no atmospheric pressure readings. Yet through thousands of rainy seasons and dry seasons, they learned to recognize even the smallest signals. A flock of birds suddenly flying low, insects mysteriously disappearing, the chorus of frogs growing louder after sunset. Any one of these might announce that rain was approaching. Remarkably, many of these observations are still used today by people living in rural communities around the world. Although they are not always perfectly accurate, they reflect the enduring relationship between humanity and the natural world. Birdsong, too, was a kind of book. Some birds sang steadily when everything was peaceful, but if the entire forest suddenly fell silent, it could be a sign that a predator was drawing near. Likewise, when a flock of birds burst suddenly into the air, prehistoric people knew that something below had startled them. Perhaps a deer, a herd of wild cattle, or perhaps a dangerous predator. Nature never stopped sending signals. The only question was whether people possessed enough patience to listen. Perhaps what prehistoric people possessed in greatest abundance was not strength, but attention. They noticed the smallest things. A branch that had only just snapped, a patch of flattened grass, a freshly fallen feather, a faint scent drifting through the breeze, a streak of drying mud upon a stone. Every sign was like another sentence in nature's immense book, and every day, they had to begin reading that book from the very first page. Not because they wished to, but because their lives depended upon it. Another skill, equally important, was understanding the behavior of animals. Prehistoric people did not simply know where an animal could be found. They also tried to understand why it was there. They knew which species preferred to feed at dawn, which became most active after dark, which returned repeatedly to the same watering places, which changed their migration routes after heavy rains. Over time, these observations formed an invisible map of the animal world, a map never drawn upon paper, but carefully preserved within the shared memory of the community. Perhaps this reminds us of a very simple truth. If we truly wish to understand something, we must first spend time observing it. We cannot simply glance at it. We cannot rely only upon assumptions. It asks for patience, humility, and genuine presence. Perhaps this, too, was one of nature's greatest lessons to our ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago. And in the next part of our journey, we will discover a skill even more precious than reading footprints or watching the sky. How prehistoric people remembered every source of fresh water, recognized every edible plant, and learned to avoid the plants capable of taking a life after only a single meal. Part 3. Shelter, fire, and the organization of daily life. When we think of prehistoric people, perhaps the first image that comes to mind is a dark cave tucked deep within a rocky cliff, where a small group gathers around a flickering fire, separated from the world beyond. That image has appeared in textbooks, films, and illustrated stories for generations, until many of us have quietly accepted it as the way humans lived throughout prehistory. But, like many stories simplified over time, the truth is far richer. Caves did indeed serve as shelters for people in certain regions and during particular periods. They offered natural protection from rain and wind, helped preserve warmth during cold seasons, and provided a greater sense of safety from predators. Many caves still preserve ancient paintings, traces of hearths, and stone tools, revealing that people lived within them for long stretches of time. But there is something important to remember. Not every landscape had caves, and not every community remained in one place long enough to call a cave home. For many hunter-gatherer groups, life was a continual journey. They followed the seasons. They followed the water. They followed the migrations of animals. When nature changed, they changed with it. And so, their homes had to adapt just as they did. Some shelters were built from flexible branches bent into graceful dome-like frames, then covered with broad leaves, dried grasses, or animal hides. In the cold regions of Ice Age Europe, archaeologists have even uncovered the remains of dwellings constructed from the enormous bones of woolly mammoths, carefully combined with animal skins to block the wind and preserve warmth. Though simple in appearance, these structures reveal an extraordinary creativity, showing how people transformed whatever nature offered into places of comfort and protection. Today, when we think of architecture, we often imagine concrete, steel, and glass. But for prehistoric people, architecture began with a very simple question: how can everyone be safe tonight? Every campsite reflected countless careful observations. They did not choose a location at random. A level piece of ground made resting easier. Slightly higher ground protected them from flooding after heavy rain. They stayed close enough to fresh water to reach it easily, but not so close to the riverbank, where rising waters and wild animals often gathered. There had to be trees for firewood. There had to be a clear view of the surrounding landscape. And perhaps most importantly, there needed to be several possible escape routes should danger suddenly appear. These decisions were shaped by the wisdom of countless generations. Nothing was written down, yet everything was remembered. Carl Gustav Jung believed that human beings carry within themselves ancient patterns connected to safety and belonging. Perhaps that is why, even today, so many people find comfort in a warmly lit room, a quiet corner overlooking trees, or the feeling of gathering together inside a sheltered space as night falls. Somewhere within the mind, we may still carry distant memories of searching for a place peaceful enough to rest after a long day's journey. But if we were to choose one discovery that transformed prehistoric life more profoundly than any other, it would likely be fire. It is difficult to imagine the lives of our ancestors before they learned to preserve it. When the sun disappeared below the horizon, darkness covered the earth. The temperature dropped quickly. The sounds of the forest began to change, and many predators became most active. Human beings had no electric lights, no insulated clothing, no locked doors. There was only the night and the cold. Then, at some point during humanity's long evolutionary journey, people learned to preserve fire created by lightning strikes or wildfires. Over time, they gradually discovered how to produce it themselves through friction or by striking together the right kinds of stone. This was not merely an invention, it was a turning point. That first enduring flame may have changed the way people understood the world itself. Its warm orange light pushed back the darkness. Its heat spread comfort through freezing nights. Food became softer, easier to digest, safer after being cooked. Today, many scientists believe that cooking food allowed humans to absorb energy more efficiently, playing a significant role in the evolution of the human brain. A seemingly simple change in food preparation may have shaped the future of our entire species. Yet fire offered even more than that. Many wild animals instinctively avoided light and smoke. A campfire burning at the center of a settlement became something like an invisible fence. Not perfect protection, but often enough to greatly reduce the risk of predators approaching too closely. And then, the fire slowly came to mean something more. It was no longer only a tool, it became a gathering place. After a long day of hunting and gathering, everyone returned. They sat together in a circle. They shared food. They cared for their children. They repaired spear points. They sharpened stone tools. They spoke about the places they had traveled. They shared everything they had observed throughout the day. Perhaps it was beside those glowing fires that humanity's very first stories were told. No one knows exactly what they were about. Perhaps they celebrated a successful hunt. Perhaps they warned of a dangerous river. Perhaps they wondered about the countless stars overhead. Or perhaps they were simply filled with the laughter of children playing in the dancing firelight. If that is true, then fire did far more than warm the body. It warmed the community itself, and perhaps it was during those quiet evenings gathered around the hearth that people first learned to tell stories, preserve memories, and pass their knowledge from one generation to the next. Even today, many people experience an unexpected sense of peace when watching the flame of a candle or sitting beside a fire. Jung might have understood this as a primordial symbol, an image that has accompanied humanity for so long, that the simple flicker of a flame still awakens feelings of safety, belonging, and hope in the deepest layers of the human psyche. For prehistoric people, fire offered one more priceless gift. It made the day longer. Before the mastery of fire, human activity largely ended when the sun disappeared. But once the fire was burning, the night no longer belonged entirely to darkness. People gained a few more precious hours to repair their tools, prepare for tomorrow's journey, study the stars, or simply sit quietly beside one another. Perhaps it was during those seemingly ordinary moments that family bonds deepened. The earliest traditions took shape, and the foundations of human culture slowly began to emerge. And even after they had found shelter and learned to protect themselves with fire against the darkness, prehistoric people still faced another challenge, just as important: how to find food each day in a world where every meal had to be earned through intelligence, patience, and cooperation. That is the story we will explore together in the next part. Part 4. Family and the Power of Community. If there is one thing we often misunderstand about prehistoric people, it is the belief that they survived through individual strength alone. In countless films, they are portrayed as solitary figures confronting a harsh wilderness with little more than muscle and courage. Yet as archaeological discoveries continue to accumulate, a very different picture has gradually emerged. What allowed our species to endure for hundreds of thousands of years was not simply the strength of any one individual, but the remarkable ability to live together, learn together, and care for one another. Imagine a quiet afternoon as the sun slowly sinks beyond the horizon. The hunters return carrying the rewards of a long day's effort. Others come back with baskets of ripe fruits gathered from the forest. Children run eagerly to greet their parents, while the elders remain seated near the fire, quietly watching everyone return. No one eats alone. No one lives entirely apart from the others. Each person forms part of the community, like individual threads woven together into a strong and enduring fabric. Today, anthropology tells us that human beings are among the most profoundly social creatures on Earth. Cooperation became one of the greatest advantages that allowed our ancestors to overcome animals that were stronger, faster, and often far more dangerous. One person alone might never bring down a large animal, but many people working together could accomplish what seemed impossible. Yet cooperation extended far beyond the hunt. It revealed itself in the ordinary moments of everyday life. When someone was injured, others offered help. When a mother needed rest after giving birth, the entire group helped care for her child. When food was plentiful, it was shared. Perhaps it was through these simple acts that the earliest foundations of compassion were laid in human history. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of prehistoric individuals who suffered severe fractures or disabilities that would have prevented them from moving independently for long periods of time. Remarkably, many of these people survived for years after their injuries. Such survival would have been nearly impossible had they been abandoned in the wilderness. Someone brought them food. Someone protected them from danger. Someone patiently cared for them while they healed. These discoveries quietly tell us that, from humanity's earliest chapters, people already knew how to love, protect, and care for one another. Carl Gustav Jung believed that a person truly becomes themselves only through relationships with others. Although every individual possesses a unique inner world, we are continually shaped by our communities, our families, and the invisible bonds that connect us with those around us. Perhaps prehistoric people understood this naturally, without ever needing to give it a name. Perhaps nowhere was this more evident than in the way they cared for children. A prehistoric child was not raised only by their parents. They were raised by the entire community. A mother might spend the day gathering food. A father might join a hunting expedition. Meanwhile, other women, older men, grandparents, or older children all helped care for the youngest members of the group. Today, scientists describe this as cooperative child rearing, a remarkably uncommon strategy among mammals, yet one that played a crucial role in human evolution. Because many adults shared the responsibility of caring for children, the young had greater chances of survival, learned more quickly, and acquired the essential skills needed for adulthood far earlier. As those children grew, they learned by watching. There were no schools, no textbooks, no blackboards. Nature was the classroom. Life itself was the lesson, and the adults became the first teachers. A young boy learned to shape stone tools by sitting beside his father. A young girl learned to recognize edible plants by following her mother into the forest. No one rushed them, no one forced them. Knowledge was passed along through patience and through experiences repeated day after day. Yet perhaps the most important keepers of knowledge were the elders. Today, when we need information, we reach for a phone or search the internet. Prehistoric people had no such luxury. Their greatest library was the memory of the old. Grandparents remembered where fresh water could still be found during drought. They remembered when the herds would return. They knew which plants could heal wounds. They remembered the safest paths when the rainy season arrived. They were not simply people who had lived longer. They were living libraries. Every wrinkle seemed to hold another story. Every tale carried decades of carefully gathered experience. Perhaps that is why the presence of elders held meaning far beyond affection alone. They became bridges between the past and the future. Jung devoted much of his work to exploring the importance of stories and symbols passed from one generation to the next. He believed that these shared narratives played a profound role in shaping human identity. When we imagine prehistoric evenings gathered around the fire, we can almost hear those first stories being told not merely for entertainment, but to preserve memory, pass on wisdom, and prepare the next generation for the world they would one day inherit. Perhaps the most beautiful part of prehistoric life was not that people conquered nature. It was that they learned to overcome loneliness. They understood that one individual could certainly be strong, but a community built upon compassion and shared responsibility would always be stronger. And it was from those small circles gathered around the fire, from the hands that lifted the injured, from the patient lessons grandparents shared with their grandchildren, that the earliest foundations of family, culture, and human society quietly began to take shape. Perhaps tens of thousands of years have passed since then. Yet somewhere deep within the human heart, we continue searching for what our ancestors once found. The feeling of belonging, the comfort of being loved, and the quiet certainty of growing within the embrace of a community. Part 5. Childhood in Prehistoric Times. When we think about childhood, each of us is likely to remember something deeply personal. Some recall a schoolyard filled with laughter. Others remember a quiet country road, or long summer afternoons spent with childhood friends beneath the warm sun. No matter the era, childhood seems to carry a kind of quiet magic. It is the season of life when we first learn to see the world through curious eyes, when we reach out to touch life through new experiences, and slowly begin becoming ourselves. But what was childhood like for a child who lived tens of thousands of years ago? Did they dream as children do today? Did they run, laugh, and play beneath the sunlight? Or was their world defined only by the relentless demands of survival? Remarkably, archaeology and anthropology tell a story that is far gentler than many of us might expect. Prehistoric children were still children. They were curious. They loved to explore. They chased butterflies. They picked up unusual stones simply because they found them beautiful. They laughed as they played with one another. Life was certainly more difficult than it is for most children today. But that does not mean their childhood was without joy. Quite the opposite. Nature itself became the greatest playground they could ever imagine. There were no plastic toys, no glowing screens, no video games. Instead, the entire forest, every stream, every meadow, became a world waiting to be discovered. Today, scientists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have observed that children still spend much of their time playing outdoors. What makes these games so remarkable is that they provide far more than simple entertainment. Quietly, almost invisibly, they prepare children for the lives they will someday lead. A small stone becomes a target for throwing. A fallen tree becomes a balance beam. A sturdy stump becomes the perfect place to practice climbing. Animal tracks pressed into the earth become a game of guessing which creature has recently passed by. Perhaps it was through play that children learned their most important skills without ever realizing they were learning. A well-aimed throw today might become tomorrow's successful hunt. A careful step across a fallen log might one day help them cross a rushing stream. A quiet afternoon, studying footprints, could become the beginning of learning how to track animals. Nature never separated learning from play. Instead, it gently wove the two together. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote that human beings develop most fully when they preserve the playful spirit of the child within them. He never regarded play as something trivial. Instead, he saw it as one of the mind's most natural ways of exploring the world, experimenting with new possibilities, and gradually discovering one's own identity. Perhaps this has been true since long before schools or books ever existed. Adults in prehistoric communities rarely gathered children together to deliver formal lessons the way we often do today. Instead, they allowed children to observe. They watched how a fire was built, how a piece of stone was carefully shaped into a tool, how the direction of the wind could be read, how fresh water was found, how a hunter walked with quiet, measured steps so as not to frighten nearby animals. Young children did not learn through lengthy explanations. They learned with their eyes, through curiosity, through repeating what they had just witnessed. It is one of humanity's oldest forms of education. Today, neuroscience tells us that children's brains develop remarkably through observation and imitation. Specialized neural systems that help us learn by watching others play a vital role in developing both social understanding and physical skills. In many ways, the natural methods of prehistoric child-rearing aligned beautifully with the way the human brain is designed to grow. As children became a little older, they gradually began participating in the simpler tasks of the community, not because they were forced to, but because this was the natural path toward becoming part of the group. They gathered firewood, carried water, helped watch younger children, accompanied adults on gathering trips close to camp. Little by little, the line between play and work became almost invisible. One day, throwing stones for fun became the first lesson in hunting. Tracking games became real tracking. Climbing games became the skills needed to escape danger. Every ability developed naturally. There was no clear boundary between learning and living. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful qualities of prehistoric childhood. It was not shaped by examinations. It was not divided into separate school subjects. Instead, it grew alongside the rhythms of nature, alongside the community, alongside lived experience. Something else made these childhoods especially remarkable. Children were never separated from the lives of the adults around them. They sat beside the evening fire. They listened to the stories of grandparents. They quietly observed conversations. They watched food being shared. They learned to care for others from their earliest years. Perhaps this is how the feeling of belonging became rooted so deeply within the human heart. Among the discoveries that have moved archaeologists most profoundly are the tiny handprints and footprints preserved upon the walls and floors of ancient caves. Beside paintings of wild cattle, horses, and woolly mammoths, appear the small hands of children, pressed into stone with red ochre or black charcoal. In some places, tiny footprints remain preserved in sediment that hardened into rock tens of thousands of years ago. These traces remind us that history was not created only by hunters or adults. Children were there as well, running, playing, growing, leaving behind their own quiet footprints in the long river of time. Perhaps when we look at those tiny handprints, we are not simply seeing a child from the distant past. We are seeing the childhood of humanity itself. A childhood filled with curiosity, filled with laughter, filled with those very first steps into an endless world of discovery. And just like every generation that has followed, those children grew through the love of their community, the patience of their elders, and the quiet lessons that nature offered every single day. Perhaps that is why, although they lived tens of thousands of years before us, imagining them running beneath the wide prehistoric sky still fills us with a feeling that is difficult to name. For deep within every adult, the child we once were still lives, still curious, still eager to explore, still quietly searching for the path that leads home to the ancient world our ancestors once knew. Part 6. The life of hunting and gathering. When we think about the lives of prehistoric people, many of us immediately imagine dramatic hunts, humans racing across open plains in pursuit of towering mammoths or enormous wild cattle. It is an image that has appeared in countless films and illustrations, giving us the impression that our ancestors spent most of their lives charging forward with spears in hand. But, like so many ideas we have explored throughout this journey, the reality is far gentler and far richer. For prehistoric people, each day was not simply another hunt. Each day was a search for balance with the natural world. Food did not come from a single source. It came from the countless quiet gifts that the earth offered in its own time. Some days, the hunt was successful. Other days, people returned with empty hands. For this reason, prehistoric communities never placed all of their hopes on a single animal. From a very early time, they learned to draw nourishment from many different sources. Perhaps this was one of humanity's earliest expressions of survival through wisdom. Large animals such as wild cattle, deer, and woolly mammoths certainly provided an abundance of food. One successful hunt could feed an entire community for many days, yet every hunt carried enormous risks. A single charge from an animal, or one misstep across uneven ground, could leave a hunter gravely injured. Success depended on far more than strength. Hunters carefully studied the direction of the wind, the shape of the landscape, the movement of the herd, and coordinated patiently with one another. Yet the meals of prehistoric people did not always begin with a great hunt. Many times, they began with a handful of berries, a cluster of seeds, or a root hidden deep beneath the soil. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies suggest that a significant portion of their diet often comes from plants. Women, children, and older adults gather fruits, dig for edible roots, collect seeds, and harvest tender leaves that can safely be eaten. This remarkable diversity provided a far more dependable source of nourishment whenever hunting became difficult. Perhaps when prehistoric people entered a forest, they did not simply see trees. They saw nature's vast garden. They knew which season each fruit would ripen, which seeds needed to be dried before eating, which roots became safe only after cooking, which leaves could quiet an empty stomach. None of this knowledge appeared overnight. It was gathered across countless seasons, through thousands of careful observations, through lessons passed from grandparents to parents, and from parents to children. Carl Gustav Jung believed that we come to understand ourselves only by understanding our relationship with the natural world. Perhaps our ancestors never imagined themselves as separate from the forests, the rivers, or the sweeping grasslands around them. They did not see nature as something to conquer. They understood themselves to be part of it, and perhaps it was this profound sense of belonging that nurtured a way of life built upon observation, gratitude, and respect. Some gifts from nature demanded even greater skill. Honey was one of them. Today, we simply walk into a store and purchase a jar of honey. For prehistoric people, it was a true treasure. They watched the flight paths of bees, They searched for hidden tree hollows. Sometimes they climbed steep cliffs. They accepted painful stings, all for one of the richest sources of energy available to them. Every drop of honey carried more than sweetness. It became a reward earned through patience and courage. Nor did nourishment come only from the land. Rivers and coastlines opened entirely different worlds. Prehistoric people learned to catch fish with spears, simple traps, or even with skilled hands in shallow waters. When the tide retreated, they walked along the shoreline, gathering shellfish, snails, and other mollusks left behind among the rocks. Today, archaeologists have uncovered enormous shell middens, dating back tens of thousands of years. These ancient piles of shells reveal that coastal foods became an important part of human diets remarkably early, and remained so across countless generations. Perhaps the most striking characteristic of prehistoric people was that they rarely depended upon nature in only one way. If berries were scarce, they searched for roots. If large animals migrated elsewhere, they hunted smaller game. If the grasslands became dry, they moved toward the rivers. When fish became plentiful, they spent more time in the water. Perhaps this flexibility was the greatest secret behind humanity's extraordinary survival. They did not try to force nature to change. They changed with nature. One of the defining characteristics of many prehistoric communities was their seasonal migration. They did not see movement as losing a home. To them, home was never merely the shelter they had built. Home was the familiar landscape they had learned to understand. When the herds traveled north, they followed. When the rainy season filled distant grasslands with fresh water, they continued their journey. This was not aimless wandering. It was a rhythm moving in harmony with the breathing of the earth itself. Perhaps we often imagine that modern people enjoy far greater freedom than our ancestors ever did. Yet from another perspective, prehistoric people possessed a remarkable kind of freedom of their own. They were not confined by walls. They were not limited by fixed roads. The sky became their roof. The grasslands became their pathways. The stars served as their compass. Every changing season opened the door to another journey. Jung once wrote that deep within the human psyche lives the image of the journey, a timeless symbol of growth and self-discovery. Perhaps the footsteps our ancestors took while following migrating herds were never only a search for food. They were also the beginning of the restless curiosity that would eventually carry humanity across towering mountains, over vast oceans, and, in time, to nearly every corner of the earth. And perhaps, as we bring tonight's story to a gentle close, we begin to see that the life of hunting and gathering was never merely a struggle against hunger. It was the art of listening to nature, the art of adapting without end, and a reminder that human intelligence has always grown through the patient observation of the world around us, from the quiet footsteps following the tracks of migrating animals, from the careful hands gathering tiny seeds, from the gratitude felt for every gift offered by the earth. The earliest relationship between humanity and nature quietly took root, a relationship that, perhaps even today, we are still learning how to rediscover. Part 7. Food and the art of preparing it. If someone were to ask what a prehistoric meal looked like, many of us would probably picture a large piece of meat roasting over an open fire and assume that was almost everything our ancestors ate. That image has appeared so often in films and stories that we have quietly come to believe prehistoric cuisine revolved almost entirely around hunting. Yet as archaeological discoveries continue to grow, they tell a very different story. One that is not only about meat, but also about plants, rivers, coastlines, and the remarkable ingenuity with which human beings learned to nourish themselves. The diet of prehistoric people was far more varied than we often imagine. Nature did not offer them only great herds of animals. It also provided countless smaller gifts. Roots hidden beneath the soil, wild grasses producing seeds with the changing seasons, berry bushes ripening beneath the summer sun, fish swimming through clear rivers, shellfish resting quietly beneath the sands of the shore. Every landscape, every season, offered its own unique menu. Perhaps this is why prehistoric people never viewed nature through the eyes of scarcity. They looked upon it with the eyes of careful observers. They knew where starchy roots could be found. They knew when wild seeds reached maturity. They knew the season when fish filled the rivers. They knew that low tide would uncover rich beds of shellfish. There was not always a great hunt, but nature almost always offered many possibilities to those patient enough to seek them. Today, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of countless plant species, seeds, and animals at prehistoric settlements. These discoveries reveal that their diets were far more diverse than once believed. This remarkable variety allowed human communities to thrive in many different environments, from open grasslands and tropical forests to coastal shores. Among their most valuable sources of nourishment, animal fat held a special place. Today, many people approach dietary fat with caution, but for prehistoric people, fat was an extraordinarily precious source of energy, especially in colder climates, where the body required enormous amounts of energy simply to stay warm. A rich supply of fat could mean the difference between enduring the harsh season or succumbing to it. Alongside fat came another treasured food, bone marrow. Hidden deep inside the large bones of hunted animals lay soft marrow, rich in fat and nutrients. Archaeologists have discovered countless animal bones intentionally broken open, showing that prehistoric people carefully extracted this valuable food rather than allowing it to go to waste. This reflects not only remarkable resourcefulness, but also a practical understanding of nutrition. Even though concepts such as vitamins or calories had not yet been imagined, yet, meat and fat alone could never sustain human health over the long term. That is why roots, wild seeds, and fruits remained essential. A single root, a handful of seeds, or a few berries may not seem extraordinary on their own, but together, they provided the balance the body needed. Nature never prepared only one kind of food. It always created diversity, and humanity learned to embrace that diversity. Carl Gustav Jung often viewed nature as a symbol of wholeness. He believed that life naturally seeks balance among many different elements. Perhaps the meals of prehistoric people reflected that same principle. They survived not because they depended upon one source of food, but because they learned to live in harmony with nature's abundant rhythms, where every season brought its own unique gifts. Along coastlines and river estuaries, an entirely different world of nourishment awaited. Fish, clams, snails, mussels, crabs. These creatures could often be gathered with far less danger than confronting massive wild animals. The ancient shell middens discovered by archaeologists resemble silent journals, quietly telling us that humans learned to make use of the sea's bounty from a very early time. They remind us that prehistoric people were not only hunters of open plains, they were also careful observers of the tides, students of flowing water, and patient enough to wait for the moments when nature became most generous. Yet, perhaps one of the greatest turning points in human history did not lie in discovering food itself. It lay in discovering how to prepare it. Imagine two meals, a piece of raw meat and a piece of meat slowly roasted over a fire, separated only by heat. Yet that simple difference helped reshape the entire course of human evolution. When food was cooked, meat became softer. Many roots became easier to eat. Some naturally occurring plant toxins were reduced. Many harmful bacteria and parasites were destroyed. Today, nutritional science tells us that cooking allows the body to extract energy more efficiently from many foods. This meant our ancestors gained more energy to sustain their daily lives while supporting the continued growth of an increasingly complex brain. A seemingly modest innovation ultimately influenced the entire evolutionary journey of humankind. But cooking offered something even more beautiful. It slowed time. A meal was no longer simply an act of eating to satisfy hunger. It became a moment for everyone to gather, to wait, to talk, to share. Around the fire, the aroma of food drifted gently through the air. Dry wood crackled softly. Faces glowed beneath the warm amber light of the flames. Perhaps it was during those first shared meals that humanity nourished more than the body. People nourished their relationships. They nourished their families. They nourished their communities. Jung believed that the rituals we repeat throughout daily life help us feel connected both to others and to ourselves. Seen through that lens, preparing and sharing a meal together may have been one of humanity's oldest rituals. It satisfied far more than hunger. It nurtured a sense of belonging, a profound human need that has accompanied our species since the dawn of history. Perhaps that is why, even today, sitting down to a warm meal often fills us with a quiet peace that is difficult to explain. Not simply because the food tastes good, but because somewhere within humanity's oldest memories, the image of people gathering around a fire to share nature's gifts still quietly lives on. And perhaps it was through those simple meals that human beings learned not only how to nourish their bodies, but also the art of caring for one another, the practice of gratitude toward the natural world, and the enduring bonds that carried our species safely through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Part 8. The technology of the Stone Age. When we hear the phrase Stone Age, many of us instinctively imagine a primitive world where people held nothing more than rough stones in their hands and lived lives almost entirely without technology. We often use the term itself as a shorthand for simplicity or even backwardness. Yet if we could sit quietly before the artifacts uncovered by archaeologists, we might begin to see that distant age through entirely different eyes. For what truly defined prehistoric people was not the stones themselves. It was the imagination that transformed stone into a tool. That is an important distinction. A bird may use a twig to catch insects. An otter may use a rock to crack open a shell. But human beings took one step further. They did not merely use what nature provided. They reshaped it. They created something that had never existed before. And perhaps, in that quiet moment, the history of technology truly began. A simple piece of stone, seemingly lifeless, could become an astonishingly sharp blade if the right material was carefully selected and struck at precisely the right angle. To create such a tool required far more than strength. The craftsperson had to imagine the finished object long before it existed. Every strike demanded careful judgment. Strike too hard, and the stone would shatter. Strike too softly, and the cutting edge would never appear. It was work that demanded patience, skill, and years of accumulated experience. Today, when we look at a smartphone or a sophisticated machine, it is easy to forget that every technology begins with one remarkably simple question. How can this task be made easier? Prehistoric people asked the very same question. Only their answers were found among stone, wood, and bone. A small stone point, firmly secured to the end of a long wooden shaft, became a spear. A tool that allowed hunters to keep a safer distance from dangerous animals. Later, smaller spear points appeared. Lighter, sharper, more accurate. Each improvement may have seemed small, yet every one increased the chances of survival. There were no laboratories, no engineering blueprints, only countless experiments and countless failures. Yet perhaps the greatest achievement was not any single tool. It was the ability to combine different materials into something greater than their individual parts. A stone, a branch, a cord, a layer of adhesive. Joined together, they became a tool far more powerful than any one material alone. Archaeologists have discovered that, surprisingly early in human history, people learned to use tree resins, and especially birch bark tar, as natural adhesives for securing stone points onto wooden shafts. What makes this especially remarkable is that producing birch tar was no simple task. It required heating birch bark in an environment with very little oxygen, creating a durable adhesive through a carefully controlled process. This suggests that prehistoric people were doing far more than observing nature. Through experience, they learned to manage physical and chemical processes long before such sciences had names. Perhaps they never spoke of chemistry, but they understood its results. They knew which resins bonded more strongly, which adhesives resisted water, when heat improved the bond, and when patience mattered more than fire. Knowledge does not always require formal language. Sometimes, it only needs to be passed on faithfully. Carl Gustav Jung believed that human wisdom is shaped not only by great ideas, but also by countless small actions repeated across generations. Perhaps every time a father showed a child how to shape stone, or a mother patiently demonstrated how to braid fibers or repair an animal hide, they were passing on far more than practical skills. They were preserving the living memory of their community, a quiet current of knowledge flowing steadily from the past into the future. Beyond stone and wood, prehistoric people also discovered the remarkable potential of softer materials. Animal sinew, once carefully prepared, became incredibly strong cord. Plant fibers were twisted into rope. These simple strands may have seemed ordinary, yet they opened countless new possibilities. They secured tools, pulled heavy loads, held shelters together, allowed people to carry their belongings across great distances. Perhaps one of history's most important inventions began simply with two strands twisted together. Today, archaeologists describe innovations such as rope, woven baskets, fishing nets, and carrying bags as soft technologies. Because they were made from organic materials, they rarely survive thousands of years beneath the earth. Yet, indirect evidence, together with observations of traditional societies, tells us that these inventions played an essential role in everyday life. Without rope, baskets, or nets, transporting food, collecting seeds, or catching fish would have been vastly more difficult. Perhaps, history is not always changed by the largest inventions. Sometimes, it is transformed by the smallest ones, the things we hardly notice. A basket can carry far more food than two hands. A fishing net can catch far more fish than a single spear. A length of rope can keep an entire shelter standing against the wind. Then, one day, human hands held something entirely new. A needle, not of metal, but of bone. Tiny bone needles, complete with carefully drilled eyes for thread, have been discovered at numerous archaeological sites. These remarkable tools reveal that prehistoric people learned to stitch animal hides together long before the invention of metalworking. Clothing no longer consisted of a simple hide draped across the shoulders. It gradually became better fitted to the body, warmer, and far more effective at protecting people living in harsh, icy climates where survival had once been nearly impossible. Perhaps this was the moment when clothing itself began to change. It was no longer simply something to cover the body. It became protection, adaptation, a means of traveling farther than ever before. The earliest shoes likely emerged from the same humble need to protect the feet from sharp stones, from snow and ice, from long journeys across unfamiliar ground. They were probably simple, soft animal hides, fastened with sinew or braided plant fibers. Yet those modest shoes accompanied humanity across sweeping grasslands, over towering mountains, and into lands no human feet had ever touched before. Jung often spoke of the craftsperson as an enduring symbol of humanity's creative spirit. Such a person is not merely someone who makes tools. They are someone who transforms imagination into reality. Looking back upon the inventions of the Stone Age, we can almost see that archetype taking shape. Every tool stands as the result of imagination, perseverance, and the quiet conviction that the world can always be improved through thoughtful human hands. And perhaps this is the most beautiful lesson the technology of the Stone Age offers us. Technology has never been defined solely by complex machines or modern inventions. From the very dawn of human history, technology has been the expression of intelligence placed in the service of life. To protect families, to adapt to an ever-changing world, and to help communities flourish, from carefully sharpened spear points, to patient hands twisting strands into rope, to delicate bone needles, to humanity's very first shoes. The long journey of human creativity quietly began, and perhaps every time we repair something with our own hands, create something new, or patiently learn a new skill, we are still tending the same creative flame that was first kindled tens of thousands of years ago. Part 9. Art and the Inner Life. When we think about prehistoric people, we often picture hunters crossing open plains, campfires glowing beneath the night sky, and endless journeys through forests and grasslands. Yet if we see them only through the lens of survival, we may overlook the most extraordinary chapter of human history. For human beings have never lived merely to survive. From a remarkably early time, they learned to sing, to paint, to decorate, to create images that nature itself had never made. And perhaps, in that very moment, a new doorway quietly opened within the human mind, the doorway to art, to symbolism, and to the inner life. At first, this may seem difficult to believe. How could people who struggled each day to find food possibly find time to create art? Yet more than a century of archaeological discoveries has steadily transformed our understanding. Human beings began making art far earlier than we once imagined. Among stone spears, animal hides, and long migrations across unfamiliar landscapes, there was still room for beauty, room for imagination, room for those things that could never fill an empty stomach, yet somehow nourished something much deeper within the human soul. Perhaps music offers one of the earliest expressions of this truth. Today, we often listen to music to unwind after a long day. But tens of thousands of years ago, beneath the flickering light of a cold evening fire, the first melodies may already have been filling the darkness. Archaeologists have discovered flutes carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory dating back more than 30,000 years. What makes these instruments so astonishing is that they were not simply hollow bones with random holes. Their finger holes were carefully positioned to produce different musical notes. This tells us that prehistoric people were not merely creating sounds, they were creating music. Imagine for a moment a child sitting beside the fire. An elder gently raises a flute to their lips. Clear notes drift softly into the silent night. The whisper of the wind, the rustling of leaves, the crackling of the fire, all blending together with humanity's earliest songs. Perhaps that moment was not so different from our own. Carl Gustav Jung believed that music reaches the deepest layers of the psyche, places where language alone is no longer enough. Perhaps that is why, from humanity's earliest beginnings, people turned to sound as a way of connecting with emotion, with one another, and with sacred mysteries they could not yet explain. If music speaks through sound, painting speaks through images. The cave paintings of prehistoric people continue to astonish us today. Upon dark stone walls, wild cattle, horses, deer, and woolly mammoths appear alive with movement. These are not the clumsy drawings of an inexperienced civilization, quite the opposite. Many reveal an astonishing gift for observation, the curve of powerful muscles, the motion of a running animal, the graceful sweep of a horn, every detail rendered with remarkable accuracy. Yet what fascinates researchers most is not the technical skill itself. It is the question, why did they paint? No one knows for certain. Perhaps they wished to preserve memories. Perhaps they were telling stories. Perhaps the paintings belonged to sacred ceremonies. Or perhaps human beings have always longed to preserve what they loved. Maybe. From the moment our ancestors first lifted a piece of charcoal to a cave wall, they began a conversation with time itself, one that has never truly ended. Nor were paintings the only artistic creations. Small carved figures also began to appear. Among the most famous is a remarkable artifact, often called the Lion Man, a human body. The head of a lion, a creature that never existed in nature, No one had ever seen such a being, yet someone imagined it. It may represent one of humanity's earliest demonstrations of an extraordinary ability, the power to combine familiar images into an entirely new symbol. It was this capacity for imagination that eventually opened the path toward mythology, religion, literature, and every culture that followed. Jung would almost certainly have been fascinated by this figure. Throughout his life's work, he argued that symbols are never merely random images. They are the language of the unconscious, where hopes, fears, instincts, and inner strengths are expressed through images rather than words. A creature that is half human and half lion may never have walked the earth, yet it may reveal something profoundly real within the human mind. The longing to unite with the strength of nature while reaching beyond the limits of ordinary existence. Archaeologists have also uncovered many small female figurines, commonly known today as Venus figurines. Their hips, breasts, and abdomens are emphasized far more than other features. Even today, their precise meaning remains uncertain. Some scholars believe they are connected to fertility. Others see them as symbols of abundance. Still others believe they represent motherhood itself. Whatever their original purpose may have been, these figures reveal that human beings had already learned to use images to express ideas extending far beyond the visible world. Then there were the tiny necklaces, made from shells, animal teeth, bone, or carefully polished stones. At first glance, they offered no advantage in hunting. They did not produce more food. Yet someone still devoted countless hours to making them. Perhaps, from the earliest days, people wished to carry with them a memory, a symbol, or simply a form of beauty that stirred the heart. Another discovery carries equally profound meaning: the widespread use of red ochre. This naturally occurring red mineral appears at archaeological sites throughout the world. It was used to decorate the body, color tools and objects, and sometimes accompanied the dead in ancient burials. Perhaps its crimson color was never merely decoration. It carried layers of meaning that we still do not fully understand. Yet its presence reveals that prehistoric people had already begun using color as a language of emotion and symbolism. Perhaps this is the greatest gift left behind by prehistoric art. Not the artifacts themselves, but what they quietly prove. Human beings have never lived by food and water alone. We have always needed stories, melodies, images, symbols, to understand the world and to understand ourselves. Jung once wrote that symbols form a bridge between consciousness and the unconscious. Looking back at the ancient bone flutes, the magnificent cave paintings, the Lion Man sculpture, the Venus figurines, and the traces of red ochre, we begin to sense that this bridge was already being built, long before writing appeared, or civilizations rose across the world. It was through imagination and creativity that human beings became different, not only because of intelligence, but because we learned to transform experience into meaning. And perhaps, every time we fall silent before a beautiful piece of music, a moving painting, or a gentle story before sleep, we are still hearing the distant echo of those first artists who once gathered beside the fire tens of thousands of years ago, sharing with the world the very first dreams of humankind. Part 10. Communication and the passing of knowledge. If there is one invention that quietly transformed the destiny of humanity almost as profoundly as fire itself, it may well have been the ability to communicate. Not eloquent speeches, not books, not vast libraries, but the very first moment when one person tried to share with another something they had seen, something they had learned, and something they hoped would never be forgotten. From those simple conversations, the history of human knowledge quietly began. We often assume that knowledge can only truly be preserved once writing exists, but the truth is very different. For most of human history, there were no books, no paper, no carved tablets, and yet, knowledge continued to flow from one generation to the next. Across tens of thousands of years, And the remarkable part is, it remained accurate enough to help people survive. That could only happen because memory itself became a shared treasure belonging to the entire community. Imagine a distant evening long ago. A gentle fire burns at the center of a circle of people. Children sit quietly, listening. An elder begins speaking about the previous hunting season, about the river that dries when the dry season arrives, about the plant that can heal a wound, about the mountain pass that should never be crossed once the snow begins to fall. These were not merely stories. They were lessons in survival. Every tale carried knowledge that might one day save a child's life. Perhaps this is why storytelling became one of humanity's oldest forms of education. Today, anthropologists have observed that among many traditional hunter-gatherer societies, stories told around the evening fire are not simply entertainment. They preserve knowledge about nature, proper behavior, hidden dangers, and the shared values of the community. A compelling story often helps people remember important lessons far more effectively than a list of dry instructions ever could. Perhaps, the human brain was designed to remember stories, rather than numbers. An image, a character, a journey, remain with us far longer than isolated facts. And perhaps our ancestors understood this very early. Carl Gustav Jung devoted much of his life to studying myths, legends, and traditional stories from cultures around the world. He believed that human beings pass on knowledge not only through information, but also through symbols and meaningful narratives. Seen in this light, the stories shared around prehistoric campfires did far more than teach future generations where to hunt or which path to follow. They also helped people understand who they were, where they belonged, and what truly mattered in life. Alongside stories, music became another bridge for memory. Even today, most of us can remember the words to a song more easily than a long paragraph of text. Perhaps this was just as true tens of thousands of years ago. A simple melody, a repeating rhythm, could preserve an astonishing amount of knowledge. The earliest songs may have told of the coming rains, seasonal migrations, great animals, or perhaps they simply lulled children gently to sleep. Music gave memory a living heartbeat, and living memories are difficult to lose. Then there was language itself. No one knows exactly when human beings first began to speak. No fossil preserves a voice. No recording remains. Yet everything humanity later accomplished suggests that language emerged remarkably early, not merely to name objects, but to share ideas, to warn of danger, to express love, to offer comfort, to teach, to imagine things that had never existed before. Perhaps language was the force that transformed countless individual minds into one collective intelligence. One person observed something important. They shared it. 10 people remembered. Then hundreds carried that knowledge forward. No other species possesses this extraordinary ability to quite the same degree. Yet what surprises researchers most is not simply that prehistoric people had language. It is the astonishing amount of knowledge they carried without writing. Today, many of us depend upon phones, maps, or notebooks. Take those tools away, and many people would quickly feel lost. Prehistoric people, by contrast, carried an entire world within their memories. They remembered pathways, not merely one trail, but entire networks crossing mountains and forests. They remembered where water remained during long droughts, which rocky outcrops contained the finest stone for making tools, which forests filled with berries at the beginning of summer, which grasslands the reindeer would return to when the cold winds arrived. This was more than memory. It was a living map, a living calendar, a living library, written not with ink, but engraved within the human mind. Carl Jung believed that the deepest layers of the human psyche resemble a vast archive, where the experiences and memories of countless generations continue to shape how we perceive the world. Although he did not suggest that people literally inherit memories, he believed we inherit ancient patterns that influence how we learn, remember, and connect with one another. Perhaps the extraordinary memory of prehistoric people reflects something of that enduring potential within the human mind. Yet perhaps the most remarkable truth of all was this: knowledge belonged to no single person. Someone who knew how to find healing plants shared that knowledge with others. Someone skilled at making tools taught the next generation. Someone who had traveled through distant lands described the safest routes home. The more knowledge was shared, the stronger the community became. Perhaps our ancestors understood very early that knowledge possesses its greatest value only when it continues to live within someone else. And it was through this quiet generosity that countless small discoveries gathered beside rivers, across hunting grounds, and among distant mountains survived thousands of generations to become the foundation upon which every later civilization would eventually stand. Perhaps, as we bring tonight's story to a close, what moves us most is not that prehistoric people lived without writing. It is that they proved an entire civilization of knowledge could be built through spoken words, shared memory, and mutual trust. The stories told beside the fire, the songs carried into the night, the quiet guidance passed from grandparents to grandchildren. These became humanity's first books. And perhaps, at this very moment, as you quietly listen to this story before drifting off to sleep, you are continuing that ancient tradition. The tradition of people who preserve memory through storytelling, who share wisdom through their voices, and who gently keep one another's inner light alive across the passage of time. Part 11. Exchange and relationships between human communities. If we were to imagine a map of the prehistoric world, it would be easy to picture small groups of people living in complete isolation, each remaining within its own forest, rarely encountering anyone beyond the next mountain. We imagine them hunting on familiar lands, setting up camp beside familiar rivers, and living entire lifetimes without ever knowing that other people existed beyond the horizon. It is a common image, yet, as with so many ideas we have explored throughout this journey, archaeology tells a story that is far broader and far more deeply connected. Human beings, perhaps, have never truly lived in isolation. Long before there were cities, long before there were nations, long before roads were paved with stone, there were still encounters, journeys, exchanges, and above all, a longing to connect with other people. One of the most fascinating pieces of evidence comes from a beautiful black volcanic glass known as obsidian. When carefully fractured, obsidian forms edges so sharp that it became an ideal material for making knives, spear points, and many other tools. What astonishes archaeologists is that obsidian has been discovered at countless prehistoric sites, hundreds, even thousands of kilometers from the volcanoes where it originated. There is only one convincing explanation. Those stones were carried there, not by the wind, not by rivers, but by human hands. Perhaps no single person traveled the entire distance. Instead, the stone may have passed through countless encounters. One community exchanged it with another. That group carried it farther. Then another continued the journey. Like a flame passed gently from one hand to the next, until its light traveled beyond the mountains themselves. Nor was stone the only traveler. Seashells from distant coastlines have also been discovered hundreds of kilometers inland. They were no longer food. Small holes had been carefully drilled through them so they could be strung into necklaces and worn as ornaments. Their value no longer lay in practical use, but in symbolism. A tiny shell could quietly tell the story of an extraordinary journey. Perhaps, from a very early time, people delighted in carrying with them small gifts from distant places, not because they were rare, but because they reminded them that beyond the horizon, there were other people, other rivers, other forests. Carl Gustav Jung believed that human beings carry within themselves a profound longing for connection. No matter the age in which we live, we are always reaching towards something beyond ourselves. Perhaps the earliest exchanges were never simply about obtaining a better tool or an attractive shell. They also reflected a deeply human desire to meet, to understand, and to share life with others. Among many traditional cultures that still exist today, a gift is never merely an object. It is a greeting, an expression of trust, the beginning of a relationship. Perhaps the same was true in prehistoric times. A beautifully crafted spear point, a string of beads, a finely prepared animal hide, a rare and beautiful stone. These things were offered, not to buy or sell, but to quietly say, "We come in peace." Sometimes, a gift is worth far more than the object itself. It opens the door to trust, and from trust, new friendships begin. Imagine, for a moment, an early morning beside a river. Two groups from different valleys happen to meet. At first, there is caution, careful glances, slow footsteps, then perhaps a friendly gesture, a few small gifts, shared laughter, curious children studying one another, adults exchanging news about migrating animals, about hidden water sources, about the storm gathering beyond the horizon. Perhaps these were humanity's very first gatherings. There were no negotiation tables, no written treaties, and yet there was understanding. Today, anthropologists believe that encounters between different communities served another vital purpose as well. They created opportunities for marriage between groups. This increased genetic diversity, reduced the risks of inbreeding, and helped maintain the long-term health of human populations. In other words, these meetings did far more than connect individuals. They quietly shaped the future of our entire species. A single marriage joined far more than two people. It connected families, communities, landscapes, and entirely different bodies of knowledge. Someone from the northern lands brought wisdom about snow. Someone raised beside the sea understood fish and the tides. When they built a life together, their knowledge blended as well, like two rivers meeting before flowing onward as one. Gradually, these relationships became alliances. Life was certainly not always peaceful. Conflict undoubtedly existed. Yet archaeology suggests that cooperation usually brought greater rewards than confrontation. Communities that trusted one another could help each other during seasons of scarcity, share precious water, offer assistance after natural disasters, or stand together against dangers too great for any single group to face alone. Jung believed that we truly mature only when we learn to recognize ourselves in other people. Every encounter offers an opportunity to discover something we ourselves are missing. Perhaps the same was true for prehistoric communities. When they met strangers, they saw more than unfamiliar faces. They encountered new ways of living, new ideas, and new possibilities for the future. Perhaps the most valuable thing ever exchanged was not obsidian, not seashells, nor even precious gifts. It was information, news of migrating herds, news of drought, news of forests consumed by fire, news of newly discovered rivers, news of fertile lands. Information, even in humanity's earliest days, was among the most precious resources of all. Those who knew more stood a greater chance of surviving. And as these stories continued to pass from one community to another, an invisible network slowly began to take shape. There were no maps, no political borders, no paved roads. Yet there were familiar routes, seasonal gathering places, relationships carefully nurtured across generations. Perhaps this became humanity's first trading network, one that exchanged not only objects, but trust, experience, and hope itself. And perhaps, as we look back upon this remarkable journey, we discover that humanity's greatest strength has never rested solely in our ability to build tools or master the natural world. It has also lived in our willingness to connect with people we have never met, to share rather than simply possess, and to understand that the prosperity of an entire community may begin with something as small as a gift offered in genuine goodwill. And perhaps, every time we smile at a stranger, listen with curiosity to a new story, or open our hearts to another culture, we are continuing a journey that began tens of thousands of years ago, the timeless journey of connection, of trust, and of moving toward the future together. Part 12. Understanding nature and the environment. If there was one book that prehistoric people devoted their entire lives to reading, it was not written on paper or inscribed with ink. It was the book of the sky, of the earth, of flowing rivers, and of every quiet breeze passing through the forest. Each sunrise opened a new page. Each changing season became a new chapter, and every sign in nature carried a message for those patient enough to observe it. Today, when we want to know the weather, we reach for our phones. When we need directions, we open a map. When we want to know the time, we glance at a clock. But for prehistoric people, all of these things were found in nature itself. The sky was humanity's first clock. The stars were its first compass, and the landscape became our first map. Perhaps that is why observation was never merely a skill. It was a way of life. A prehistoric person, waking at dawn, probably did not rush immediately into the day. Instead, they took time to look toward the sky, the colors of sunrise, the shape of the clouds, the direction of the wind, the moisture carried in the air, the songs of birds. Each was a small yet deeply important sign. They spoke without words, yet together they quietly revealed what the coming day might bring. Some clouds foretold approaching rain. Some winds carried the chill of distant mountains. Some mornings became strangely still before a storm arrived. They did not always predict correctly, but every careful observation became another lesson. Their knowledge was built upon thousands of dawns just like these. Carl Gustav Jung believed that nature reflects something within the human psyche itself. When we quietly observe the sky or listen to the wind, it is not only our understanding of the outer world that changes. Our own minds become quieter as well. Perhaps our ancestors never separated the act of observing nature from the act of listening inward. To them, the two may have been one and the same. When night slowly descended, another book opened, the book of the stars. Today, the lights of our cities often hide the Milky Way from view. But for prehistoric people, the stars were as familiar as old friends. They appeared every night, quietly, patiently, never ceasing in their slow movement across the heavens. Researchers believe that very early in human history, people learned to recognize familiar constellations to find their way. Long before astronomy became a science, remembering the positions of the stars helped travelers navigate great distances, especially across open grasslands and deserts where natural landmarks were few. Imagine a small group walking silently beneath a winter sky. No lanterns, no signposts, only starlight. Yet they knew they were traveling in the right direction. Perhaps the sky has never truly been silent. It has always whispered to those who know how to look. Nor were the stars alone. The moon became another trusted companion. On bright, moonlit nights, travel became easier. Watching animals became easier as well. On darker nights, people remained closer to the warmth of the fire. Across countless generations, they noticed that the moon always returned, with an almost unchanging rhythm. Its cycle gradually became a way of measuring time. No calendars, no numbers, only a glance toward the sky, and another great cycle had begun. Perhaps it was through these patient observations that humanity first realized something profound. The world did not move randomly. Nature followed patterns, and once those patterns became understood, people no longer merely reacted to change. They began preparing for it. The sky was not the only teacher. Animals carried their own clocks as well. Birds appeared, then disappeared. Fish arrived, then moved on. Reindeer returned. At the familiar season, trees blossomed, bore fruit, then shed their leaves. Everything moved, in slow circles, yet always, with remarkable consistency. Prehistoric people did not see these events as isolated occurrences. They recognized the connections between them. When one species of bird appeared, perhaps the rainy season was near. When insects became abundant, fish might soon gather close to shore. When a certain tree began to flower, another animal might begin its migration. Today, science describes this as recognizing environmental patterns. For prehistoric people, however, it simply emerged from years of careful observation and faithful memory. Their ability to connect seemingly insignificant signs allowed them to anticipate changes in their surroundings and make wise decisions at exactly the right moment. Carl Jung once suggested that modern people often lose their sensitivity to nature's rhythms because our lives are filled with constant noise and endless distractions. Perhaps our ancestors possessed the opposite gift. They lived slowly enough to notice the world's smallest changes. And through that patience, they came to understand that nature was never chaotic. It was a symphony, moving with an unmistakable rhythm. Perhaps the most beautiful image of prehistoric intelligence is not a sharpened spear, but a person standing quietly upon an open plain, watching, listening, remembering. Every hill, every stream, every great stone held meaning. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they had become landmarks within memory itself. A leaning tree marked the path north. A towering rock became a familiar resting place. A bend in the river revealed where fish gathered in abundance. Gradually, an entire landscape became a living map. No paper, no symbols, only experience, carefully accumulated across generations. Perhaps this is what moves us most when we look back upon prehistoric humanity. They did not master nature by standing above it. They understood nature by living within it. They read the wind as though reading a line of text. They read the sky as though turning the pages of a beloved book. They read the landscape as though reading the memory of their own lives. Perhaps that is why, even without compasses, clocks, or satellites, they crossed immense landscapes while rarely losing their way. And perhaps, as tonight's story gently comes to an end, and you quietly look up at a sky filled with stars, or simply listen to the rain beyond your window, something ancient within your own spirit may quietly awaken. The part that once belonged to those distant ancestors who spent their lives conversing silently with the natural world. In Jung's view, perhaps that memory has never truly disappeared. It has simply waited patiently for us to slow down, to lift our eyes toward the heavens once more, and to remember that since the dawn of human history, human beings have always found their way by listening to the gentle heartbeat of the world. Part 13: Physical Health, Well-being, and Healing. When we think about the health of prehistoric people, many of us imagine lives that were short, filled with illness, and almost entirely without hope of healing. It is easy to picture a world where even a small wound could end a life, where people living amid the hardships of nature were helpless in the face of pain and disease. Yet, as with so many discoveries throughout this journey, the archaeological evidence tells a far more nuanced and far more hopeful story. It is true that prehistoric life was never easy. People walked for many kilometers each day. They climbed mountains, crossed rivers, faced dangerous animals, carried heavy tools, endured bitter cold, or the relentless heat of the dry season. Day after day, their bodies worked almost without rest. Scrapes, falls, cuts were probably familiar companions. Yet what is remarkable is this: they kept living. Archaeologists have uncovered countless skeletons bearing the marks of broken arms, fractured legs, crushed ribs, and severe spinal injuries. What makes these discoveries extraordinary is that many of these fractures had healed completely before the individuals died. This tells us that they survived their injuries and, more importantly, that they had time to recover. A person with a broken arm cannot hunt alone. Someone with injured legs cannot easily search for food. Recovery of this kind could only happen if others remained beside them, offering care and support. Perhaps, what allowed humanity to endure was not that people suffered fewer injuries. It was that they did not suffer alone. Someone carried water. Someone shared their portion of food. An entire group waited patiently until an injured companion could walk again. This was more than assistance. It was compassion. And perhaps, compassion itself became part of human evolution. Carl Gustav Jung believed that empathy is among the deepest expressions of psychological maturity. We do not exist merely as isolated individuals. We grow through our relationships with one another. Perhaps prehistoric communities understood this instinctively. When one person suffered, the burden was quietly shared by everyone. Another question often arises. How long did prehistoric people actually live? The answer is not simple. Many children died young because life was so demanding. This lowers the average life expectancy. But those who survived childhood and avoided major accidents could often live into their 50s, their 60s, and sometimes even longer. The skeletons of older adults, discovered at archaeological sites, bear witness to this reality. The weathered elders we sometimes imagine sitting beside ancient fires were not simply figures of fantasy. They truly existed. They grew old, and they became the living keepers of their community's memories. Time also left unmistakable marks upon the body. Every skeleton tells the story of a human life. A worn knee, a curved spine, a shoulder strengthened by years of carrying heavy loads, an arm more powerful from countless spear throws. Every mark became another line in a diary, written not with ink, but with bone. No words were needed, yet an entire lifetime could still be read. Even teeth have stories to tell. By studying patterns of wear on ancient teeth, scientists can learn what prehistoric people ate, how they used their teeth to grip objects, and even whether they endured periods of nutritional stress during their lives. Some teeth are worn down dramatically from chewing tough plants, or from holding animal hides and plant fibers while crafting tools and clothing. These tiny traces survive as fragile diary pages, written tens of thousands of years ago. Yet perhaps the greatest surprise of all is that prehistoric people were not entirely helpless against illness. They observed plants. They learned that certain leaves could ease pain, that some roots soothed an aching stomach, that particular tree resins could be applied to wounds. Today, research suggests that many medicinal plants used in traditional healing have extraordinarily ancient origins. Although prehistoric people knew nothing of bacteria or chemical compounds, they gradually accumulated knowledge through careful observation and generations of experimentation. Nature itself became humanity's first pharmacy. Even more remarkable is the evidence surrounding the Neanderthals. For many years, they were portrayed as crude, unsophisticated, and unintelligent. Today, that picture has changed dramatically. Studies of fossilized dental plaque, together with archaeological discoveries, suggest that Neanderthals may have used certain plants with medicinal properties. Combined with skeletons showing individuals who survived severe injuries for many years, this evidence suggests that they not only cared for one another, but also possessed practical knowledge that supported healing and recovery. Perhaps this invites us to see them differently, not simply as hunters, but as healers, people capable of patience, of hope, of waiting beside a loved one until strength returned. Carl Jung wrote that healing takes place not only within the body, but also within the soul. He believed that human beings possess a remarkable capacity for renewal when they live within relationships of care and support. Perhaps the same was true for prehistoric communities. Recovery did not come only from medicinal plants or nourishing food. It also came from the quiet presence of those who refused to leave another person's side. Perhaps the greatest wonder of all is that the human body gradually adapted to such a demanding way of life. Muscles grew stronger with every journey. Bones became denser through constant movement. The lungs adapted to long distances. The ability to endure cold, to withstand hunger, to recover from exhaustion, all were strengthened, season after season. Not because humanity became stronger than nature, but because humanity learned how to live with nature. Perhaps, when we look back upon prehistoric people, we begin to realize that health has never simply meant the absence of disease. Health is also the ability to rise again after falling, the resilience of the body in the face of hardship, and the strength of a community that cares for its most vulnerable members. Healed bones, teeth that still preserve the story of a lifetime, the earliest medicines gathered from forests and fields. Together, they remind us that the history of humanity is not only a history of survival, it is also a history of healing. And perhaps, as you gently close your eyes after tonight's story, your own body is quietly doing what it has done for hundreds of thousands of years, repairing itself, restoring itself, and patiently finding its way back toward balance. Perhaps that is the oldest gift nature has ever given humanity. A body that knows how to adapt, a spirit that knows how to hope, and a heart that finds its deepest healing in the caring presence of others. Part 14. Animals and humanity's relationship with them. When we think about the world of prehistoric people, we often place human beings at the center of the story. But if we step back for a moment and look at the larger picture, we discover that they never lived alone. They shared their world with countless animals, from gentle grazers roaming the open plains to formidable predators hidden within the darkness. Every single day brought another encounter between humanity and the wild. Some encounters brought food, some brought danger, and some quietly changed the history of both species forever. Imagine a morning tens of thousands of years ago. Mist still blankets the grasslands. In the distance, a herd of woolly mammoths slowly makes its way toward a watering place. Their enormous curved tusks catch the first light of dawn. Each heavy footstep sends a gentle tremor through the earth. To prehistoric people, a mammoth was never just another animal. It was an entire world. A single mammoth could provide enough meat to feed an entire community for many days. Its hide offered warmth through the long winter. Its bones became building materials for shelters and tools. Its ivory was transformed into remarkably beautiful works of art. Almost nothing was wasted. This tells us that prehistoric hunters did more than simply kill. They understood how to honor every gift that nature provided. Yet this world was not filled only with peaceful giants. Deep within the forests, cave lions watched silently. These magnificent cats were among the most formidable predators of prehistoric Europe. Larger than the lions we know today, they possessed the strength to bring down enormous prey. For human beings, every journey into the forest was not simply a search for food, it was also an entrance into the territory of other hunters. Then there were the cave bears, immense creatures that often spent the winter inside rocky caves. Interestingly, human beings loved those caves as well. Perhaps many times, both species desired the very same shelter, and that must have led to tense confrontations. Not every cave uncovered by archaeologists once belonged to people. Many were first occupied by cave bears before humans settled there, or the reverse. These discoveries remind us that prehistoric people were never the sole masters of their world. They were simply one of many species searching for a safe place to live. Across the grasslands, hyenas also roamed. Not the laughing creatures often portrayed in films, but highly efficient hunters and scavengers. Sometimes, people and hyenas competed for the same prey. Sometimes, humans arrived first. Sometimes, the hyenas did. Nature drew no clear boundaries. There was only competition and adaptation. Perhaps it was because people lived among such powerful animals that they learned humility. They understood that they were not the strongest creatures, not the fastest, nor the ones with the sharpest teeth. What allowed them to survive was never brute strength. It was observation, cooperation, and knowing exactly when to act. Carl Gustav Jung believed that deep within the unconscious, human beings still carry the images of ancient animals. They appear in our dreams, our myths, and the symbolic traditions of cultures around the world. To Jung, Animals represented far more than the natural world outside us. They also reflected the instinctive forces living quietly within the human soul. Perhaps that is why humanity's relationship with animals has always reached far beyond the simple act of hunting. Among all the creatures that shared the prehistoric world, perhaps no story is more beautiful than the story of the wolf. Today, when we see a dog peacefully sleeping at our feet, it is difficult to imagine that its ancestors were once wild wolves. Yet, from that ancient relationship, one of the oldest friendships in history was born. No one knows exactly how dogs were first domesticated. Perhaps the less aggressive wolves began lingering near human camps, feeding on scraps left behind. Gradually, people grew accustomed to their presence. The gentler animals were allowed to remain. Across countless generations, both species slowly changed. Wolves became dogs, and human beings gained a loyal companion. Perhaps this was never truly a conquest. It was a choice, made by both sides. Humans offered food. Dogs offered vigilance. Their sensitive ears detected movements hidden within the darkness. Their remarkable sense of smell followed trails that people could barely perceive. During the hunt, they helped track prey. On cold nights, they rested beside the fire, keeping quiet watch. Perhaps, long before humanity built its first permanent homes, the bark of a dog became our earliest alarm system. And long before there were guards standing watch, there were bright eyes, awake in the darkness, protecting an entire community. Yet what makes this story so extraordinary is not simply usefulness, it is friendship. Imagine a prehistoric child playing outside the camp. A young dog runs happily beside them. Two creatures, two different species, growing up together, discovering the world together. Without sharing a language, they still understand one another. Without making promises, they remain together. Perhaps it was through countless ordinary moments like these that a friendship lasting tens of thousands of years quietly began. Jung often spoke of the image of the companion as a symbol of loyalty and connection throughout the human journey towards psychological wholeness. Seen through this lens, the dog is more than a domesticated animal. It represents humanity's ability to move beyond fear and build trust with a creature entirely different from ourselves. Such a bond marks not only a milestone in civilization, but also in the evolution of the human spirit. Perhaps the most beautiful lesson we learn from looking back at humanity's relationship with animals is that nature was never merely a place from which people took. It was a living world, filled with relationships, with competition, with respect, with learning, and with companionship. The mammoths, the cave lions, the cave bears, the hyenas, each taught humanity something about courage, humility, and survival. And the first dogs taught us something even more enduring, that trust can reach beyond the boundaries of species. And perhaps, when a dog quietly sleeps beside its human companion today, there is still a distant memory reflected in those peaceful eyes. A memory of cold nights beside an ancient fire. A memory of a human and a young wolf choosing for the very first time to remain together. From that simple moment, not only was a friendship born, but one of the deepest, most enduring, and most moving bonds that nature has ever offered to either of our two species. Part 15. Death and Ritual. Perhaps there is no moment that causes us to pause and reflect more deeply than the moment we must say goodbye to someone we love. That is true for us today, and perhaps it was just as true for people who lived tens of thousands of years ago. For although prehistoric life differed from ours in almost every imaginable way, there was one experience we have always shared: the sorrow of loss and the quiet question of what death truly means. For a very long time, many believed that prehistoric people simply abandoned those who had died. That amid the hardships of survival, there was no time for ceremony, no place for grief, no quiet moment to mourn. But then, archaeology began telling a different story. A story filled with humanity. Across archaeological sites throughout Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, researchers have uncovered graves dating back tens of thousands of years. The dead were not left behind carelessly, they were placed with intention. Some rested on their sides as though peacefully asleep. Others were laid with their knees drawn gently toward the chest. Many were carefully placed within graves that had been deliberately prepared in advance. These details reveal something profound. Death was not treated as a forgotten ending. It was approached with dignity, care, and respect. Imagine a quiet afternoon long ago. A small fire burns softly within the camp. Together, people begin digging into the earth. No one rushes. No one speaks loudly. There is only the wind, the gentle sound of falling soil, and silent eyes, filled with remembrance. Perhaps this was one of humanity's very first rituals, a ceremony requiring no words, yet expressing immeasurable love. Perhaps what moves archaeologists most is the presence of grave offerings. Beside the person who had died, there might rest a spear, a stone tool, a necklace, a carefully polished animal tooth, or the familiar possessions that had accompanied them throughout life. No one knows exactly what prehistoric people believed as they placed these objects into the grave. Perhaps they thought the departed would need them elsewhere. Perhaps it was simply their way of saying goodbye. Or perhaps those belongings were too deeply woven into a loved one's life for the living to keep them. Whatever the answer may be, these quiet gifts reveal something beautiful. Human beings had already begun to think about death through love, not merely through instinct. Carl Gustav Jung believed that the way people confront death always reflects the way they understand life itself. To him, death was never simply an ending. Within the deeper layers of the psyche, it also became a symbol of transformation, perhaps even in prehistoric times. Long before written philosophies or organized religions, people sensed that the departure of a loved one could never be explained solely by the disappearance of the body. One of the greatest mysteries found within many ancient graves is the presence of red ochre. This brilliant crimson mineral was sprinkled across the body of the deceased, or spread throughout the grave itself. Even today, no one knows exactly why. Some believe the color symbolized blood, life, renewal. Others see it as part of a sacred ritual. Whatever its original meaning, its repeated appearance across burial sites throughout the world tells us one important truth. It was not accidental. It was a symbol, and symbols often speak far more deeply than words. Jung devoted much of his life to studying symbols like these. He believed that every culture creates images capable of expressing truths that language alone cannot fully capture. Seen from this perspective, the red ochre found in ancient graves may never have been merely a color. It may have become a way of expressing hope, sorrow, or the quiet belief that life somehow continues in another form. Perhaps this was the first time human beings began asking themselves, what happens after we close our eyes? No one can know how prehistoric people answered that question, but the very fact that they asked it reveals something extraordinary. For only when we begin reflecting upon death do we begin to understand life more deeply. Perhaps children also sat beside the evening fire, listening as the elders spoke about those who had gone before, not to cultivate fear, but to preserve memory, to remember their names, their hunts, their lessons, their stories. In this quiet way, those who had died continued to live within the memory of the community. Today, many anthropologists believe that remembering ancestors played an essential role in shaping the identities of the earliest human communities. Those who came before were no longer simply private memories. They became part of a shared history, the source of traditions, wisdom, and values carried from one generation to the next. Perhaps this was also when the idea of ancestors first began to emerge, not as distant figures, but as people who remained present within every story, every lesson, every familiar path they had once walked. Carl Jung described something like this as the continuation of the collective memory. He did not believe that we inherit the literal memories of those who lived before us. Rather, he believed that every generation is quietly nourished by ancient patterns, enduring symbols, and accumulated human experience reaching deep into our shared past. Perhaps that is why the idea of our ancestors continues to touch people so profoundly across every culture. There is something deeply beautiful about these ancient graves. They do not simply tell us how prehistoric people died. They tell us how deeply they loved. For only those who love take the time to bury their dead. Only those who love place familiar possessions beside someone who will never return. Only those who love come back to remember. Perhaps it was in the quiet moment when the first handfuls of earth were gently laid upon the body of a loved one that one of the deepest dimensions of the human spirit was born. From that moment onward, death was no longer merely the end of a life. It became a bridge between memory and the present, between the living and those who came before them. And perhaps every time we quietly remember someone we have lost, light a candle, place a flower upon a grave, or simply smile while recalling an old memory, we are continuing a ritual that began tens of thousands of years ago, a ritual that is profoundly simple, profoundly human, a ritual in which love remains stronger than time, and memory gently allows those who have departed to continue living within the hearts of those who remain. Part 16. How archaeological traces tell the story of everyday life. When we walk into an archaeological museum, our attention is often drawn to the largest and most striking artifacts. A nearly complete skeleton, a finely crafted spear, an ancient sculpture, or a magnificent painting on a cave wall. These are the objects that naturally invite us to stop and admire them. Yet the fascinating truth is that most of the story of prehistoric life is not told by these remarkable discoveries. It is told by things so small that, if we happened to see them lying on the ground, we would probably walk right past them. A handful of ashes, a broken fragment of bone, a charred seed, an old tooth, or the faint imprint of a footprint pressed into ancient soil. To most people, they are simply fragments of the past. But to archaeologists, they are the first written lines of human history. Archaeology may be one of the most patient sciences of all. Its practitioners cannot ask prehistoric people how they lived. They cannot listen to their stories. They cannot read their journals. All that remains are tiny traces. And from those traces, piece by piece, they patiently reconstruct an entire world that disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. Let us begin with something that seems almost ordinary: the ashes of an ancient fire. Once the flames have faded, only a thin layer of ash remains. To the naked eye, it appears almost meaningless. Yet within those ashes, scientists can identify tiny pieces of charcoal, determine which species of wood were burned, estimate the temperature of the fire, and sometimes even detect traces of meals once prepared nearby. A silent pile of ashes can reveal that people once gathered here, that warmth once filled this place, that laughter once echoed through the night, and that stories were once shared beneath a sky filled with stars. Then there are the bones, not only human bones, but animal bones as well. A bone split neatly in two may reveal that people extracted its nutritious marrow. A tiny cut mark across its surface may show where a stone knife separated meat from bone. A bone blackened by fire tells us that it once rested in the flames. These discoveries need no words. They tell their own stories. Perhaps history has never truly been silent. We have simply needed to learn how to listen. Carl Gustav Jung once observed that every symbol carries meanings hidden beneath the surface. In a sense, archaeology follows a remarkably similar path. It studies things that appear small and ordinary, searching for the far greater stories concealed within them. A fragment of bone is never merely a fragment of bone. It is the trace of a life once lived. Even charred seeds, so tiny they could rest upon the tip of a finger, become silent witnesses. Many survived because they were accidentally burned in ancient fires before being buried beneath layers of earth. Through them, archaeologists discover which seeds prehistoric people gathered, which plants they ate, and what kinds of vegetation surrounded their homes. A single tiny seed can open an entire window onto the climate, the seasons, and the food sources of a community that vanished long ago. Then there are broken tools. Today, when something breaks, we often throw it away. Prehistoric people did much the same, yet those discarded objects have become treasures for archaeology. A chipped stone fragment reveals techniques of stoneworking. A broken spear point teaches us about hunting. A tool repaired again and again shows that its material was so valuable it could not easily be replaced. Perhaps discarded objects sometimes tell more honest stories than those that remain perfectly preserved. And then there are discoveries that leave us almost speechless. Footprints in several caves and ancient landscapes. Archaeologists have uncovered footprints preserved for tens of thousands of years. Some belong to men, some to women, others to very young children. By studying the distance between each step, the depth of the impressions, and the direction of movement, researchers can estimate a person's speed, posture, and sometimes even the activity taking place in that distant moment. Imagine a child running across soft earth, never knowing that those tiny footprints would still exist, thousands upon thousands of years later, waiting for someone in the 21st century to quietly smile, realizing that humanity's own childhood once looked remarkably familiar. One of modern science's most astonishing discoveries comes from somewhere few people would ever expect. Dental plaque. The hardened plaque preserved on ancient teeth can trap pollen, starch, grains, bacteria, and countless microscopic traces. By studying these deposits, scientists can reconstruct prehistoric diets, identify certain illnesses, and even find evidence suggesting the use of medicinal plants. Knowledge once thought forever lost can now emerge from a thin layer upon the surface of a tooth. Perhaps history enjoys hiding its greatest secrets in the places where we least expect to find them. And finally, there is something left behind by nearly every human community, their everyday refuse. Today, the word trash usually suggests something worthless, but to archaeologists, ancient refuse pits are among the richest sources of information imaginable. Animal bones, shells, seeds, broken tools, and countless discarded objects allow researchers to reconstruct almost every aspect of daily life. What people ate, what they crafted, what they used each day. All of it remains quietly preserved beneath the earth. Carl Jung believed that if we truly wish to understand a person, we should not look only at their greatest achievements. We must also pay attention to the ordinary moments that make up everyday life. Perhaps archaeology follows that same wisdom. It does not search only for priceless treasures. It searches for the quiet fragments of ordinary existence. And it is those simple traces that often reveal the most authentic portrait of a human life. Perhaps that is what makes archaeology so profoundly beautiful. It does not simply excavate earth. It excavates memory. It does not merely restore artifacts. It restores lives. A fireplace, a tooth, a footprint, a seed, a fragment of bone. Individually, each seems insignificant, but together they tell the story of an entire humanity. And perhaps the deepest lesson these ancient traces offer us is not simply how prehistoric people lived. It is that every human life, no matter how ordinary, leaves something behind. Not everyone builds great monuments. Not everyone has their name recorded in history. Yet every shared meal, every footprint, every act of caring for someone we love, and every story told beside a quiet fire becomes part of the human story. But perhaps, in Jung's understanding, no memory is ever truly lost. It simply rests, patiently, within the earth, waiting for someone, one day, to listen with care and tell its story once again, with the reverence owed to lives that were once fully lived. Part 17. The ways prehistoric people were more like us than we imagine. After our long journey through ancient forests, endless grasslands, caves wrapped in darkness, and campfires that faded tens of thousands of years ago, perhaps we begin to realize something remarkable. The most fascinating thing about prehistoric people is not how different they were from us. It is how much they were like us. For centuries, prehistoric people were often portrayed as rough, simple beings. Creatures who only hunted, only fought, only struggled to survive. But with every archaeological discovery, every skeleton, every cave painting, every stone tool, that image has slowly changed. Beneath the animal hides, behind the spears, there was still a heart capable of love, a soul capable of dreaming. Perhaps the first thing that makes them so much like us is their capacity to love. Love leaves no fossils. It cannot be unearthed. Like a stone axe, it cannot be measured with rulers or scales. And yet, sometimes, it leaves traces. The skeleton of someone who survived severe injuries for many years, an elderly person who could no longer hunt, yet continued to be cared for, a child laid gently to rest in a carefully prepared grave. Each discovery tells the same quiet story. Someone stayed, someone cared, someone refused to abandon the person they loved. Perhaps love was never an invention of civilization. It had already existed, long before, when humanity still lived among the wild. Carl Gustav Jung believed that deep within the human psyche lies an ancient need for connection with others. We do not mature in isolation. We become ourselves through relationships. Perhaps this truth has been with us since humanity's very first communities. No one could hunt a mammoth alone. No one could guard the camp through the entire night alone. No one could raise a child entirely alone. Cooperation was never simply a choice. It was a condition for survival. Perhaps that is also why human beings became the most successful species on Earth. Not because we were the strongest, but because we learned to become stronger together. Yet, people did not cooperate, only to survive. They also created a sharper stone tool, a better balanced spear, a bone needle for sewing clothing, or beautiful paintings upon cave walls. Each reveals that imagination had already begun reaching beyond life's most basic needs. When someone spent hours carving mammoth ivory or grinding minerals into pigments to paint upon stone, they were no longer thinking only about surviving another day. They were creating beauty, and perhaps, in that very moment, art was born. Perhaps, human beings have never lived by bread alone. We have always lived through meaning, through beauty, and through the things that stir the soul. Then night would fall. The meal would end, the fire would burn low, and what happened next? Perhaps stories. No one knows exactly what prehistoric people told one another, but it seems almost certain that they told stories, perhaps about yesterday's hunt, a strange animal they had encountered, a distant mountain, or a loved one who was no longer there. These stories were never only entertainment. They passed on experience, nourished imagination, and reminded a community who they were. Perhaps every civilization begins with a storyteller. Carl Jung devoted much of his work to studying myths and ancient stories. He believed that we understand ourselves through the stories we tell. The symbols, characters, and journeys found in myths reflect not only the outer world, but also the inner landscape of the soul. Perhaps it was around those earliest campfires that the first seeds of humanity's spiritual life were quietly planted. Another reason prehistoric people feel so familiar is the way they cared for their elders. At many archaeological sites, scientists have discovered individuals who lived to an advanced age. That tells us something important. They were not left behind. When their strength faded, their communities continued caring for them. Perhaps they no longer ran the fastest or hunted the best, but they became living libraries. They remembered the trails, the migrations of animals, the plants that could heal, the stories of the ancestors. Their presence was one of the community's greatest treasures. And then there were the children, growing up, surrounded by many caring hands. They learned how to build a fire, how to read footprints, how to understand the sky. But perhaps the very first lesson they learned was how to love. For children do not learn only through words. They learn by watching how adults treat one another. Perhaps that is how compassion itself was passed from one generation to the next. Something else that surprises many people is that prehistoric people also appreciated beauty. Necklaces, bracelets, polished animal teeth, red ochre, patterns carved into bone, all reveal that people cared about more than simply staying alive. They also cared about how they appeared before others. Adornment, perhaps, was never about vanity. It was about expressing identity, belonging, saying something about oneself, even before writing existed. But perhaps the greatest gift of all was imagination. Imagination allowed people to see a tool inside a stone, a shelter within a cave, a painting upon a blank wall of rock, a future within a child, and perhaps another world beyond death. No one has ever seen the future, yet humanity has always imagined it. Perhaps that has always been the mind's most extraordinary gift. And finally, perhaps the thing that makes prehistoric people most like us is that they remembered, they grieved, they honored those who had gone before. The graves, the burial gifts, the quiet ceremonies. Together, they tell us that love does not end. When a life comes to a close, it continues living in memory, in stories, and in the hearts of those who remain. Carl Jung believed that humanity's memory does not exist only in books or artifacts. It also lives within the deep layers of the collective unconscious. Perhaps that is why prehistoric people do not feel distant when we look back at them. Instead, they seem strangely familiar. Their hopes were our hopes. They longed to be loved, to belong to a community, to protect their children, to preserve beauty, to understand the meaning of life, and to believe that those they loved would never truly be forgotten. Perhaps that is the most beautiful gift this journey into prehistoric humanity has given us. After everything we have learned about stone tools, fire, animals, the night sky, and the countless traces left beneath the earth, we discover that the greatest treasure was never the artifacts themselves. The greatest treasure has always been the continuity of humanity. Within each of us today, something very ancient still quietly lives. The part of us that knows how to love someone who is suffering, that tells a child a bedtime story, that gazes upward at a sky full of stars with wonder, that falls silent before a grave, remembering someone who has gone. Perhaps tens of thousands of years have passed, yet the human heart still beats with the same familiar rhythm, and it is that rhythm that quietly binds us to our very first ancestors, like a fire that has never truly gone out, burning gently through the endless passage of time. Part 18. A harsh world, yet deeply human. Perhaps when we first began this journey, each of us carried a familiar image of prehistoric people, a figure wrapped in animal hides, holding a stone spear, living inside a cave, spending every day fleeing hunger and dangerous beasts. It is an image that has appeared in textbooks, films, and the imagination of generations. But after quietly walking through each chapter of this story, after standing beside fossilized footprints, ancient campfires long gone cold, forgotten graves, paintings upon cave walls, and teeth that have preserved memories stretching back tens of thousands of years, perhaps we find ourselves smiling as we realize something unexpected. Prehistoric people were never truly primitive, in the way we once imagined. What separated them from us was not intelligence, it was time. They had no electricity, no writing, no machines, no maps, no antibiotics. But that did not mean they lacked knowledge. Quite the opposite. Every single day they survived was evidence of extraordinary intelligence. To endure in a constantly changing world, strength alone was never enough. They had to read the sky to anticipate the weather, interpret footprints in the earth to follow prey, recognize which plants could heal and which fruits should never be eaten. They learned to shape tools, kindle fire, build shelter, care for children, and protect their communities. Every one of these skills required careful observation, a remarkable memory, and a willingness to keep learning. Perhaps, if one of us were transported back into that world without any modern technology, we would quickly discover how little we truly know. While prehistoric people understood every wind, every rainy season, every subtle sign written throughout nature, in a very real sense, they were experts in the world they inhabited. Carl Gustav Jung often reminded us that genuine knowledge comes not only from books, but also from experience accumulated across generations. Perhaps prehistoric people embody this truth more clearly than anyone. They possessed no libraries. Nature itself became their library. Every passing season offered another lesson. Every mistake became another teacher. And each generation quietly handed its wisdom to the next. No one is born knowing how to make fire. No one is born knowing how to shape stone. No one is born knowing how to read the sky. Everything had to be learned, and that learning continued for tens of thousands of years. A child watched a father shape stone. A young girl learned from her mother which plants could heal. A young hunter listened as an elder described the migrations of great herds. These ordinary moments, so easily overlooked, quietly became the foundation of civilization itself. Perhaps the greatest inheritance left by prehistoric people was never a stone axe. It was the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to another. For knowledge does not live inside stone, it lives inside people. Yet knowledge alone was never enough. Their lives were also built upon memory. Without maps, they remembered every stream. Without calendars, they remembered every season. Without books, they remembered every story. Without schools, memory itself became humanity's first classroom. Perhaps memory is the invisible bridge between the past and the future. Everything one person learned across an entire lifetime did not disappear with old age. It continued living in stories, in daily practices, and in the attentive eyes of children quietly watching. It was this continuity that allowed humanity to grow from one generation to the next. But memory, too, could never survive. Without cooperation, no one could live. Alone, one person tended the fire, another hunted, another gathered fruit, another cared for the children, another kept watch. Every task helped sustain the entire community. Perhaps humanity's greatest strength has never been its muscles. It has always been our ability to share responsibility. Jung believed that we truly understand ourselves only when we recognize that we belong to something greater than ourselves. We are never isolated islands. We are shaped by family, community, and the relationships surrounding us. Perhaps this truth has existed since humanity's earliest camps. Alongside cooperation, there was another quiet quality, one no less essential: compassion. Healed bones, elders who were cared for, children who grew safely into adulthood, graves prepared with tenderness. Each tells us that prehistoric people did more than survive. They cared, they waited, they sacrificed, they placed others before themselves. Perhaps compassion has always been humanity's greatest invention, and there is one more quality we have returned to again and again. Throughout this journey, their ability to read nature. They watched the clouds to predict rain, the stars to find their way, the birds to recognize the changing seasons, animal tracks to locate food, the wind to sense approaching change. To them, to nature was never an enemy. It was a teacher, a book, a home, an endless source of wisdom. Perhaps because they lived so close to the natural world, prehistoric people developed an extraordinary sensitivity to everything around them. They did not try to control every force they encountered. Instead, they learned to listen, to observe, and to adapt. In Jung's view, this reflects a profound harmony between humanity and the deeper rhythms of life itself. When we stop struggling against nature, we begin to understand that we are part of nature as well. And so, what remains? After tens of thousands of years, not only stone axes, not only cave paintings, not only ashes or fossilized footprints, what remains is the image of human beings who knew how to love, who knew how to create, who knew how to learn, who knew how to hope, who knew how to remember, who knew how to tell stories, who knew how to care for one another, and who still found time to lift their eyes toward the sky and to ask themselves, who am I? Perhaps that is the greatest legacy prehistoric people left behind. Not the artifacts resting quietly behind museum glass, but the truth that, from the very dawn of human history, human beings already possessed nearly all the qualities that make us truly human. They knew how to build communities, how to preserve memory, how to search for meaning, and how to pass hope on to the next generation. Those qualities are still alive within us today. When Carl Gustav Jung wrote about the collective unconscious, he believed that an unseen current flows through all humanity, quietly connecting the past with the present. Perhaps, after this long journey together, we begin to sense that current ourselves. It reveals itself through intuition, through dreams, through the peace we feel beside a glowing fire, through the quiet awe inspired by a sky filled with stars, and through our longing to belong to a community where we are loved. And perhaps, when tonight's story comes to its gentle close, what lingers in your mind will not be the image of a world filled with danger, but the image of ordinary people who lived within the vastness of nature with wisdom, kindness, and extraordinary patience. They left behind no great stone cities, but they left us something far more enduring. They left us our humanity, a humanity that still quietly lives within each of us, like the very first fire kindled tens of thousands of years ago, still offering its warmth through every generation, never truly extinguished. And so, our own journey slowly reaches its final steps. The night has grown quieter. Beyond your window, the world is likely still moving forward. Cities continue to glow beneath their lights. Roads remain busy with passing travelers. Rivers flow silently toward the sea. And above it all, the stars continue shining, just as they did tens of thousands of years ago, when the first prehistoric people lifted their eyes toward the night with wonder, curiosity, and hope. Throughout this journey, we have walked together. Through many worlds, we have gathered around humanity's first fires, followed the footprints of woolly mammoths, listened to the wind, crossing endless grasslands, sat inside dark caves, where flickering firelight danced across ancient paintings. We met mothers, holding their children close, craftspeople patiently shaping stone, elders telling stories to eager young listeners, hunters returning after long days, the first dogs sleeping peacefully beside the fire, and people quietly saying farewell to those they loved with all the tenderness they possessed. At the beginning, we believed we were learning about prehistoric people, but perhaps what we truly discovered was ourselves. For the more deeply we looked into the past, the more we realized that the distance between us and our ancestors is not nearly as great as we once imagined. They worried, they hoped, they loved, they were afraid, they experienced loss, they cared for one another, they dreamed of a better tomorrow, and above all, they searched for meaning in their lives. Carl Gustav Jung devoted his life to exploring the deepest layers of the human soul. He believed that beneath the differences of history, language, and culture flows a shared current connecting every human being. He called it the collective unconscious, a place where humanity's most ancient memories continue to live quietly within us all. Perhaps, after this journey, that idea no longer feels quite so abstract. For when you find peace beside a glowing fire, when you stand silently beneath a sky full of stars, when the scent of rain upon the earth gently calms your heart, or when an ancient story unexpectedly touches something deep within you, perhaps those are the invisible threads connecting you to countless generations who came before. We often think of history as kings, great battles, empires, or magnificent monuments, but history is also made of very small things. A mother holding her child, a father teaching a son or daughter how to make a fire, an elder passing along hard-earned wisdom, a meal shared together, a helping hand lifting someone who has fallen, a story told beside the fire, a final handful of earth placed gently upon someone dearly loved. These quiet moments have carried humanity through bitter winters, through droughts, through storms, and through challenges that once seemed impossible to overcome. Perhaps that is why the greatest miracle in human history has never been our increasingly sophisticated tools. The greatest miracle is that we have never lost our ability to love, no matter how the world changes, no matter how many tens of thousands of years pass, no matter how civilizations rise and fall, human beings continue searching for a home, a community, someone to trust, a story worth remembering, and a reason to keep moving forward. Perhaps that is the most beautiful gift our prehistoric ancestors left behind. Not a civilization built of stone, but a civilization built upon compassion, upon cooperation, upon wisdom, upon memory, upon creativity, and upon the belief that no one should have to face life alone. If tonight, as you prepare to drift into sleep, you happen to feel small within this vast universe, remember this: you are the newest chapter in a journey that has lasted hundreds of thousands of years. Within every beat of your heart lives the resilience of people who survived unforgiving winters. Within every breath rests the memory of ancient forests. Within your intuition lies wisdom gathered across countless generations. And within your ability to love burns the same fire that was passed from humanity's earliest communities all the way to this very moment. It has been a very long journey, a remarkably long one, and you are its newest chapter. Thank you for spending this peaceful time with me, traveling back through time to explore the lives of Earth's earliest people. I hope tonight's story has offered you not only a deeper appreciation for our shared history, but also a little peace, a slower rhythm, and perhaps a gentler connection with yourself. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through history, psychology, the mysteries of nature, and thoughtful explorations of the human experience through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue creating new stories to accompany your peaceful evenings. You are also welcome to share this video with someone you think might enjoy these slow, reflective journeys. Sometimes, a story heard before sleep can become the gentlest gift we offer another person. And now, it is time to bring this day to a close. Let your shoulders soften, let your breathing slow. Allow every thought to settle gently like the still surface of a quiet lake beneath the night sky. Let your mind drift peacefully with the whispering wind, with the warm glow of an ancient campfire, and beneath the same star-filled sky our ancestors gazed upon tens of thousands of years ago. I wish you a truly peaceful night, a deep, restorative sleep, gentle dreams, and when the first light of morning quietly arrives, may you awaken with a lighter heart, a calmer spirit, and a deeper appreciation for the extraordinary journey that humanity has traveled together. Sleep well, and I look forward to sharing our next story with you.